The time has come to put an end to what everyone had gathered for in this huge hall. People are tired of the constant unrest and ask the saint to sort it out. The girl faces a difficult choice because the fate of the people depends on her. Meanwhile, they continue to beg for peace to reign in the empire. Members of each faction ask her for help, and the leaders stare at her. One of them is the crown prince and swordmaster of the Illid Empire. Kyle Alexis, a leader, makes it clear with his focused gaze that the saint must choose him. But besides him, the high priest is present in the hall as if he stepped out of a painting. Ray House de El's smile makes it clear that he has already prepared a place for the saint in prison. However, there was still one more, the blue-eyed head of the Merchants Guild. Unlike the other two characters, Cass Lloyd is completely impenetrable. No matter how hard the saint tries, she cannot read what he is thinking. In addition, messages from the gods constantly appear before her eyes. The girl is in despair and does not understand how it came to this. Her ears are ringing from these comments and she's about to break down. However, now is not the time to hang your head, and it is time to make a decision. This morning, the girl wakes up with a severe headache and sighs heavily. The saint's maid, who is deeply concerned about her mistress's condition, comes to her aid. This girl's name is Annie, but such a minor character didn't even have a name in the novel. For the last 2 days, the saint constantly asked about her name and did not understand anything. However, now she decides to behave naturally and makes it clear that she is better off. After this, Annie invites the mistress to have lunch and bring the food directly to the bedroom. After all, in such a state she shouldn't even go to His Highness's banquet, although the high priest sent her a dress. The real Ariel would have been panicked that she wouldn't be able to congratulate the prince. And this saint reports that everything is fine and asks to order dinner to be brought. However, the girl does not want to see the salad, and Annie reminds that the lady has never even eaten it. Then the maid immediately leaves to carry out the order, and the mistress remains alone in her room. The girl sits down on the bed and realizes that her sapphire eyes are the same as Ariel's. In a past life, she read about the life of the righteous Saint Camilla. And it's obvious that she has now been reborn as the character in this book. She was supported by 3 handsome men from different walks of life and even worshipped her. They all later became her husbands, which would be strange in the real world. And in this novel, it's like a harem, only the other way around, when the girl has power over her husbands. But now what worries her most is that 2 days ago she was reborn in this novel. Ariel's mother was a simple baroness, and the girl was an illegitimate child. They treated her as if she didn't exist, and she always went to church. The girl prayed for marriage, and one day the high priest noticed her. Ray House brought his bride to the Temple of Elysium, and 2 years later she began to perform the role of the saint. But for the sake of political stability, Prince Kyle and Ray House came up with the idea of making Ariel terminally ill. She knew that when a real saint appeared, she would be immediately disposed of, but she hoped for Ray House's protection. At the same time, Ariel adored Crown Prince Kyle and kept this secret. The girl was a villain who was jealous of Camilla and tried to kill her. But as soon as she raised the dagger, she was immediately pierced by 3 sharp swords. As a result, Ariel died quickly, without even having time to cry out in pain. But now our heroine is in her body and she doesn't want to die at all. She still remembers the moment she met her death in her past life. It is obvious that she will have to stay and play the role of Ariel for the rest of her life. But in the novel, after living independently for only a year, the girl abruptly left this world. However, now Ariel decides to take a little break and opens the balcony door. Bright rays of the sun immediately fall on her, forcing the girl to close her eyes. However, she feels a rush of fresh air that only the living can enjoy. In her last seconds of life, the girl realized that anything was better than death. Compared to her past, things are still good here, and she comes up with a plan to change the future. She has been reborn to the point of no return and has plenty of time to explore this world. And when Camilla appears, the new Ariel will simply give up her place to her. She will leave the temple, buy herself some house, and live her own life. There is no point in denying reality, and one should accept that she is now Ariel. Suddenly, the girl looks up and experiences a strong shock. A sign appears in front of her with a message that a wonderful journey awaits her. Those who have existed since the beginning of time and who were bored with this world became interested in her abilities. Ariel rereads these lines several times, but still does not understand their meaning. After some time, the messages disappear, and the girl stands in complete bewilderment. It might just be a dream, but at that moment there is a knock at the door. Ariel turns her head and waits to see who will appear in her room. It turns out to be a man with golden hair who looks nothing like Annie. The girl runs through in her head all the possible characters described in the novel. She sees that a stranger has brought her lunch, and Ariel already guesses who it might be. Could it be that she sees with her own eyes the High Priest Rayhouse de El? And at that moment he smiles because the girl called him by his name for the first time. Ariel remembers that only Camilla addressed him that way, and she only used his title. So the girl decides to apologize and says that she was just thinking. But Rayhouse likes it even better this way, and these words surprise the heroine. It turns out that the man is already starting to forget his real name. He looks at her with his golden eyes and allows her to continue calling him by his name. The real Ariel would probably be beaming with happiness, but our heroine decides not to cross the line. So she tells Rayhouse that she should take better care of herself. You can't speak so disrespectfully to the High Priest and get into trouble. After this, the girl smiles sweetly and adds that this will not happen again. Rayhouse does not answer her, but silently accepts the saint's wish. To Ariel's surprise, he seems like a very kind and polite man. It looks exactly as described in the novel, but it is very nice to see it in real life. At this point, Rayhouse announces that he will give the girl whatever she wants. However, she should remember that with freedom comes responsibility. This was also the case with Camilla, who, after becoming a saint, continued to call him by his name. After all, the High Priest is almost as influential as the members of the imperial family, and it was Rayhouse who brought Ariel into the sanctuary and forced her to play the role of a saint. Now he regrets that the girl is not going to address him by his first name. Ariel clearly feels like he's putting pressure on her and changes the subject by thanking him for lunch. Only he knows that she is not a saint, and it is better not to anger him. However, Rayhouse adds that he is constantly haunted by the feeling that she does not seem like herself today. After some time, Ariel decides to study in the library and becomes fascinated with the process. After this, she feels satisfaction from the mental process and stretches. The girl is in a good mood, as her conversation with Rayhouse went well. Now she can focus on what she has learned over the last couple of days. It is now 722, and there are 5 years left until Camilla's arrival. The heroine found herself in the empire of Ilid, where both monarchs and clergy were equally revered. Almost the entire population is made up of believers, and sanctuaries of the gods are located everywhere. There are 9 of them in total, and the Temple of Ilium is considered the place of worship of all the gods. It is here that Ariel lives, and it was here that the saint was born. Ilium is the religious center of the empire, and there must be something about the prophecy here. Ariel finds information that one of the gods will decide to share holy wisdom. A blue square with a prophecy will appear in front of the saint, which will be imprinted on her heart. At this moment, the girl thinks about how difficult it is for people to understand the language of the gods. There was a scene in the book where Camilla used divine power, but there is no word about it here, and Ariel, disappointed, decides to look for something else. There are a lot of books in the Imperial Library, and the girl intends to read as many as possible. She finds information about monthly maintenance costs. It's something like a salary, and according to her calculations, it comes to 220 million won a year. It turns out that after changing the saint, Ariel will be able to live comfortably until old age. But the heroine from the book spent all the money as soon as she received it. It's good that our Ariel is not like that and will be able to save up for a house for herself and then leave. But suddenly she is distracted by some sound that seems familiar to her. And again a blue square appears, indicating that someone has taken an interest in her notes. The girl feels as if she is not in a novel, but in a computer game. But at that moment, Annie enters the room and brings the lady tea. Ariel turns to her and realizes that the maid has arrived just in time. Finally, she will be able to understand whether everything is just her imagination or whether it is reality. The girl then points to the board and asks if Annie can see it. But from the maid's side, it looks as if the mistress is pointing her finger into the air. Annie doesn't see any blue square and thinks the saint is still not well. Moreover, she adds that in this condition she will not be able to take up her duties. If you think about it, Ariel has been doing nothing but eating, drinking and reading for 3 days now. And Camilla constantly made pilgrimages and met with the emperor and the prince himself. However, Ariel is not a real saint and is not required to be one. She has to pretend to be ill to explain her absence from the temples. At this moment, Annie distracts her from her thoughts and reminds her of her brother. The girl once told the saint that he had fallen ill, and now he had to get into debt. Ariel listens attentively, and the maid hints that he cannot cope without her help. It is clear that Annie is embarrassed to ask for something, but the lady does not yet understand the essence. At this point, the maid asks for a little more raise in her salary. Meanwhile, a strange smile appears on her face. Ariel was stunned and speechless by this request. However, Annie's expression seems very familiar and insincere to her. Only those who wanted to take advantage of the girl smiled like that. This sly grin is familiar to her from her past life, even though she comes from a wealthy family. In the book, the villain Ariel was very compassionate, and Annie decided to profit from her. But our heroine is not a real saint and will not allow herself to be taken advantage of. After this, the girl turns to the maid and she is ready to hear a positive answer. But Ariel only asks if she has ever been given money. Annie replies that the lady once helped her out by agreeing to help her brother. She paid her 650 francs, although a maid's salary was only 200. Now it's clear why the heroine of the novel was always broke, and the present-day Ariel decides to show Annie her true place. Therefore, the lady suggests that she think carefully before opening her mouth. And from this day on, Ariel will not give the maid another penny. She already receives a good salary, but she dares to ask for even more. Annie is furious, but the lady offers to bring her brother here. The stables are in dire need of extra hands, and the maid will not have to worry about her relative. But Annie always considered the saint inferior to herself and did not expect to hear a refusal. The maid even loses her temper and starts screaming openly. Ariel has already encountered such people in her past life and knows them well. A maid has no right to behave so disrespectfully towards a saint. However, Annie pulls an ace out of her sleeve and reminds that she knows the mistress's secret. This prank discourages Ariel and she is at a loss for words. And at this moment, the maid shows all her hatred and calls the saint an imposter. Now it's clear why the real Ariel paid the maid so much money. And Annie starts threatening to tell everyone who the saint really is. But Ariel doesn't fall for her blackmail and suggests that the maid act right now. The book heroine would have continued to pay off the maid, but now everything will be different. It all started with 300 francs, and now the girl's insolence has reached 700. Ariel, without batting an eye, tells the maid that she can tell everyone her secret. However, Annie explains that in such a case the lady will face consequences. But the girl already knows that she faces execution for this. But at the same time, people will not forget about the servant who reported this. After all, she knew about this lie for so long and hid the truth for money. Ariel knows very well what will happen to Annie after this, and she is overcome with horror. At the same time, the heroine herself will die beautifully because she is half a noblewoman. But such a death is clearly not in store for the maid, who is an ordinary commoner. Moreover, from the outside, it looks as if Annie is jealous of Ariel. And since she found out the truth, she had to tell it right away. And now she has nowhere to go, since they are sailing in the same boat. Otherwise, the maid will have to risk her life if she dares to open her mouth. After this, Ariel falls silent for a moment and notices that Annie is shaking violently. She then decides to find out if her family knows about this secret. Annie tries to justify herself by saying that she didn't tell anyone about it. But Ariel doesn't believe her words, and the maid tries her best to protect her family. However, even after this, the lady reports that Annie did not convince her at all. So she will have to check everything herself and talk to her family. At this moment, Annie loses all her insolence and asks her mistress for forgiveness. The maid falls to her knees and says that she doesn't need any money. Moreover, she promises that something like this will not happen again. And at this moment, the heroine cannot believe that Ariel allowed herself to be used like this. Meanwhile, Annie continues to tearfully beg for forgiveness. Suddenly, the high priest enters the room and witnesses this incident. At this moment, Annie is overcome with even greater horror at the man's reaction. She tries to justify herself, but Ray House has already taken out his dagger. At that very moment, drops of blood begin to fly everywhere, and Annie's voice falls silent. Ariel watches this scene and cannot believe what is happening. However, the high priest's gaze after all this remains cold and unwavering. After this, he informs Ariel that circumstances left him no other choice. The girl understands that Ray House was afraid of the saint's secret being revealed. However, she could never have imagined that she would witness such a scene. Even if there were no guarantees, he still shouldn't have killed her. And while Ariel is trying to come to her senses, the high priest promises her to clean everything up here. But the girl just turns her head to the side and doesn't answer. After this, Ray House leaves the room and advises Ariel to rest. At this time, she waits for the door to close and tries to relax. Then the girl grabs her head and tries to think about what happened. The problem is that Ray House actually did the right thing. In the end, Annie died without even having time to scream before her death. And one day, Ariel will face the same fate as her servant. They will deal with her as soon as she is no longer needed. This fact makes Ariel feel terrified at the thought of her death. But suddenly, a notification appears before the girl that higher powers are interested in her thinking. At this time, Ray House walks through the temple and plays all of Ariel's words over in his head. He remembers how the girl spoke of the death that awaited the maid. He couldn't remember Ariel being so determined before. The maids could whisper quietly behind her back, but she only played the victim. However, he is still sure that the saint does not have an ounce of brains, otherwise it would not have come to this. The Temple of Ilium is considered to be the place of worship of all 9 gods. If the saint serves all the gods, then the high priest serves only one. This also applies to Ray House, who just arrived at the place of worship. His gaze becomes very thoughtful when he sees his god. He worships the god of art, Monte, who is depicted in the form of a statue. Ray House closes his eyes at this moment and begins to pray to him. Meanwhile, Ariel is being served by a new maid who has already managed to get into trouble. The girl tries to apologize sincerely, but the lady asks her not to worry. After this, the maid leaves and says that she will come at the first call. Ariel then starts laughing because so much fuss was made over a simple salad. Now everyone is going crazy, and the maids are changing so quickly that she doesn't have time to remember them. However, we must not forget that our heroine is in another world. And unlike in reality, human life is treated differently here. Annie died only yesterday, and already it seems like no one cares about her. Ariel wasn't used to this, but if the truth were revealed, the Empire would suffer. So she understands that circumstances really left Ray House no other choice. And the girl decides that she needs to escape from there, since over time the chances of survival are getting smaller and smaller. After this, she sits down at the table to prepare for her escape. Then Ariel looks at the store's shopping prices and realizes that she can only afford the average one. The heroine from the book was stupid and apathetic, and if she hid well, Ray House would forget about her. After this, the girl calculates the time frame and happily realizes that she has 3 years. Now she no longer has to give Annie a large part of her salary and can save money. But suddenly the girl is distracted from her dream by some strange sounds. Ariel looks at the door and tries to figure out who is there. At that moment, Ray House, whom she did not expect to see, enters the room. The girl is outraged that he didn't even knock, but she doesn't tell him about it. And the high priest sees that Ariel greets him according to etiquette and is surprised at this in his thoughts. Then he sees a lot of notes on her desk and decides that she is completely immersed in her studies. But Ray House must not be allowed to see her notes, otherwise he will guess about the saint's plans. So she gets ahead of him and tells him that she just wanted to show him something. Tomorrow is His Highness's birthday, and Ariel has prepared a speech. Of course, it was written by a real heroine, and the girl didn't even think that she would need it. At this point, Ray House begins to read the congratulations out loud. But even our heroine didn't expect that Ariel would write so openly about her love for Kyle. She even blushes at how many confessions in this letter are dedicated to the prince. The girl, of course, knew that Ariel was a naive fool, but she didn't feel such shame. Therefore, she asks the high priest to give her congratulations so that she can rewrite it. However, he only focuses his serious gaze on her and asks about her love for Kyle. Ariel is stunned by this question and begins to deny everything. It seems that unrequited love is a sore subject for the heroine, but the girl explains that this is about the love of the gods for people. However, Ray House is wise and informs that Prince Kyle may see it differently, and what will happen if he still thinks about the wrong love. The real Ariel probably thought it was just a simple congratulation, but our heroine promises the high priest to rewrite the speech, and a smile appears on his face. The man is pleased with the girl's actions and says that she is growing up right before his eyes. And while he hands over the piece of paper, she can't believe that he praised her for such a trifle. But the greeting accidentally falls to the floor and Ray House bends down to pick it up. Then he takes it in his hands again, and the girl notices his beautiful amber eyes. She is so excited that she can't even utter a word. After this, Ariel thanks Ray House and looks away. She decides not to look into his beautiful eyes, and the high priest suggests meeting tomorrow. Sometime later, Ariel visits the library and tries to forget about the moments of shame with congratulations. She wants to prepare for tomorrow's celebration and is looking for guidance. Suddenly, the girl notices how one of the men begins to harass the girl serving God. And this impudent fellow doesn't leave the nun alone and demands that she go to dinner with him, pinning her against the wall. Ariel is not indifferent to this situation and decides to intervene. At this time, the girl already starts to cry and demands to be left alone. After this, the saint demands that the man leave the nun and look for someone outside the church. But this impudent fellow only silently looks at Ariel, and she again demands that he leave the temple. And the man explains that they were just having a nice conversation and he is not guilty of anything. However, Ariel saw everything with her own eyes, and the nun also reports that he molested her. The man begins to justify himself by saying that Eliam recruits just anyone. Everyone simply conspired against him and decided to accuse him of harassment. But the nun is outraged by his words and says that he himself invited her to have a drink. At this point, Ariel asks the man to introduce himself, and he says he is Hans of Ragefield. The saint had never heard of such people, and they didn't seem to be very famous. After this, Hans asks the girls to introduce themselves and promises to complain about everything to the saint. And the maids behind Ariel are indignant that the man does not understand who is standing in front of him. But Ariel doesn't let them finish and asks the nun to clarify something. She ignores the man and wants the girl to name those who can excommunicate from the church. Hearing that he was about to be enlightened, Hans fell silent for a moment. And at this moment, the nun is preparing to answer the question posed. According to the rules, the patriarch or the high priest can excommunicate. Also, the saint, which is Ariel, has such power. In addition, along with excommunication, a person is also deprived of his noble title. But Hans is too self-confident and believes that he cannot be excommunicated from the church. However, Ragefield is wrong not to trust the girl and behave so brazenly. At that moment, Ariel comes up to him and grabs his lips, silencing him. She then looks Hans straight in the eye and tells him that she is the saint. After this, Ariel lets go of his mouth, but the man cannot recover from the shock. He can't believe he behaved so brazenly in front of this girl. Meanwhile, Saint promises to write a complaint against the Ragefield family, but Hans asks her not to do this and falls to his knees, begging for forgiveness. If he had known that it was a saint in front of him, he would never have made such a mistake. Hans understands what consequences may await him and asks with all his might for forgiveness. And at this moment, Ariel informs that her forgiveness must be earned. And to do this, he first needs to apologize to the nun he insulted. However, Hans explains that he was just joking and is not guilty of anything. But in that case, he wants to say that the eyes of the saint and the 9 gods are wrong. After this, the man realizes that he has no choice and apologizes to the nun. The girl did not expect that they would ask for forgiveness in front of her and was very surprised by this. And at this moment, Ariel understands that the conflict can be resolved. Now she can go about her business and asks to bring her a collection of books on etiquette. Suddenly, the notification pops up in front of her again that the gods have taken an interest in her sense of justice. Now she has the ability to receive prophecies, and she is the first person with such an ability. Other notifications then appear, and this shocks Ariel. After some time, the girl takes the necessary books and sits down to study them. She reads about the saint's unique abilities and her ability to receive prophecies. Now Ariel understands that she has attracted the attention of the gods. But she was so tired of these notifications, as if a nightclub was opening today. It all looks like some kind of game interface that describes the actions of the gods. However, Ariel does not consider herself a saint, and there is no mention of exceptions in the books. At this point, she decides that she needs to somehow turn off these notifications. But the gods are in a panic from this idea, and the girl decides not to do it, after which the higher powers relax. From the outside, it looks like they got their internet back. Or as if a man on a desert island managed to pick up a radio wave. As much as Ariel doesn't want to, she will have to come to terms with these prophecies. However, all this is very strange, because she is not a real saint. Suddenly, a notification pops up in front of her that the god of knowledge wants to show her something. Ariel activates the sensor and feels as if she is absorbing the contents of the books. She feels like she is reading hundreds of books at once. There are even some that are not in the library, and now you don't have to worry about anything. But the acquisition of knowledge suddenly stops, since the girl has a low level of prophecy. In this case, all she can do is look at what she has already received. Suddenly, she is overcome with a wonderful feeling of blessing from Hesed, the god of knowledge. After this, Ariel's head feels like it's 1,000 times lighter. She only had time to glance at the book, and already she had absorbed all its contents. Now, this ability will allow the girl to work faster. Although she had been very lucky, it still happened too quickly. And after a while, Ariel leaves the library, and early in the morning she already has time to take a shower. Now she feels like new and decides to rest after yesterday's fruitful day. She also noticed that the blessing of Hesed lasted for 3 hours, and then everything returned to its place. At this moment, someone starts knocking on her door, and the girl allows him to enter. Rayhouse appears on the threshold again and asks how she slept. Ariel replies that she slept well, and the god of art cannot take his eyes off the man. Then the high priest notices the many books and praises the girl for her hard work, and she decides to behave sincerely in order to build a good relationship. But there's something wrong with Rayhouse, and is it because a real heroine wouldn't act like that? In this case, the girl decides to distract him with introspection. She says that she used to act like a child and will now try not to cause trouble. Ariel doesn't know when the real saint will appear, but until then she will behave more reservedly. After these words, the high priest's gaze becomes too serious. He replies that he has already asked the girl to consider this place home. But she has a feeling that because of their shared secret, he won't let her out of here alive. After this, Rayhouse extends his hand and asks her to give him a new speech. Ariel hands him a piece of paper with congratulations, and the man reads it silently. All this time he does not say a word and does not show any reaction. Ariel is already starting to think that something is wrong with her speech and is worried about it. However, Rayhouse informs her that this is a wonderful congratulation. The girl has matured a lot in his eyes during this time, and he can't even believe it. But to avoid arousing suspicion, Ariel took the speech from collections and changed it slightly. At this point, Rayhouse becomes interested in the scandal that occurred in the library, and the girl explains that she saw Hans harassing one of the nuns. Like a saint, she gave him a warning and perhaps went a little overboard. And Rayhouse reports that he has already excommunicated this man and his entire family from the church. And in the future, Ariel should immediately report such things to him. She is surprised by his actions, since everything could have been resolved between Anna and Hans. At this moment, a warning comes from the god Hesed for the saint to beware of Rayhouse. He sees that the man has a rotten soul, and the god Monty considers his good looks more important. Ariel doesn't understand why the gods started all this from scratch and reads the notifications. At this time, Raiches observes the girl and decides that she has become ill. At this point, she becomes distracted and explains that she is simply amazed by the man's determination. After all, it is not so easy to get rid of rot and distinguish those who are impure in heart. It turns out that other priests condemned Rayhouse's decision, but he sees support in Ariel's words, and she says that he acted fairly. At least when she read the book, she always thought of Rayhouse as wise. Unlike the prince, the high priest decided to deceive in order to calm the people. For the villain Ariel, he was an executioner, but for Camilla, he was a true protector. If the girl were reborn as Camilla, she would probably admire Rayhouse. After this, the man apologizes for wasting Ariel's time and leaves Ariel's room. But she doesn't understand why he left so abruptly and what went wrong. After all, the girl did quite well and tried not to say anything unnecessary. But Ariel doesn't even have time to worry about it because of the notifications. At this time, the gods begin to argue among themselves, and messages describe their every action. Ariel is already clutching her head and begging him to stop talking nonsense. Meanwhile, Rayhouse doesn't understand when everything changed. He remembers the blue eyes of the girl that he saw only now, but for some reason he had never noticed them or paid attention to them before. And that smile of Ariel's, was it really always so sweet? Rayhouse only chose her because she was stupid and naive for her role. But now the girl seems to have turned into a different person, and he is losing his head. At this moment, he is distracted by an angry man who is dissatisfied with his actions. This is Father Haynes, and he is very angry that Rayhouse did not consult him. After all, even if the saint herself had decided to excommunicate Ragefield from the church, he should not have agreed. An entire family cannot be excommunicated from the church because of the misdeed of one of its members. And like the other priests, Haynes is categorically against this. But Rayhouse says that he did not excommunicate them because of Hans's misdeed. The whole point is that the whole family was involved in a conspiracy with some priests. One man told him that the rot was not easy to get rid of, but it only made him feel better. And now Rayhouse is going to cut off all the rotten shoots in this temple. Haynes becomes very agitated by this and only asks to consult with him in the future. And it would be better if Rayhouse himself would decide such issues without the saint's intervention. But the high priest changes the subject and reports a large number of monsters in the Ares mine. So it would be better if Haynes went into that mine and found out everything, since he has nothing better to do. The priest was very frightened by this news and said that he was too old for this. However, Rayhouse's decision is unwavering, and he doesn't even listen to his excuses. The priest realizes that he has no choice and will have to go into the mine. Moreover, one cannot contradict or refuse the orders of the high priest. At this time, Nun Anna from the library is kneeling in the saint's room. The maid reports that she insisted on an audience and wants to say something. Ariel remembers that this is the girl she saw in the library. Now she wants to hear what the nun wants to tell her. It is clear that the girl is very nervous and has difficulty speaking, but she still gathers her courage and asks the saint to allow her to serve her. Ariel did not expect such a request and replies that she no longer needs servants. Moreover, unlike the maids, Anna has magic and it is dangerous to keep her around. But the nun was very grateful to the saint for her help and did not even have time to say thank you to her. Since Ariel helped her out, the girl would really like to serve her. The saint sees Anna's sincerity and cannot remain indifferent. So she waves her hand and asks the maid to leave. After the door slams, she begins a conversation with the nun. Ariel tells her about a maid who recently died before her eyes. Although she worked for her for a very long time, it did not save the girl from death. And it all happened because the maid couldn't keep her mouth shut. But a nun is no one to the saint and, moreover, will not be able to avoid a similar fate. Ariel hopes that this might scare Anna and make her change her mind. But the girl still continues to want to serve her and doesn't even blink an eye. It turns out that she is an orphan and was lucky enough to end up in the temple. However, her life did not change in any way, and the girl never learned to stand up for herself. But that day in the library, a nobleman apologized to her for the first time. The saint seemed to illuminate her life with light, and now she wants to become like her. Moreover, Anna is destined to serve the gods in this temple forever. So why not dedicate your life to the saint and serve her as well? Anna wants to do everything to survive and repay Ariel for her kindness. But the saint explains that as long as she is useful to her, no one will lay a finger on her. However, she cannot confidently guarantee the safety of her family either. Anna is not at all frightened by this, and she still resolutely wants to serve the saint. The next day, Ariel leaves the temple and prepares to board the carriage. She is met by Dwayne, who is the commander of the Second Army. The man says that it is an honor for him to accompany the saint. Ariel has been sitting idle for a long time, and now she is going to the prince's birthday. From the outside, the temple seems much larger to her than it seemed before. When she gets ready to leave here, the girl will definitely need a horse. But suddenly, Ariel is distracted from her thoughts and notices a lot of people outside the window. Everyone rejoices at her appearance, and now she understands what it is like to be a saint. People revere and love the servant of the gods who brings them peace. Moreover, the saint conveys the will of the gods, which is so interesting to the people. Ariel now wonders if she really is receiving messages from a higher power. At this point, in the notice, Hesed expresses his dissatisfaction with her thoughts. But Ariel considers herself a fake saint, which means they are not real gods. She asks them to prove otherwise, and at that moment thunder is heard and lightning appears. The girl is very surprised by the appearance of a thunderstorm in the middle of a clear sky. After this, she realizes that real gods are communicating with her. But now she has a simple empty notification window in front of her, and everyone is silent. Ariel decides to wait a little longer, but no messages appear. She then looks out the window with a smile and sees a notice that Odysseus is interested in it. The girl is glad that at least the gods don't read thoughts, and after a while she arrives at the palace. Everyone inside is openly staring at her, but Ariel is used to it. The main thing is to keep your chin up and your gait more confident. And with this attitude and determined look, Ariel walks past hundreds of people. At this time, an orchestra plays string instruments in the imperial palace. The saint stops at the throne and realizes that the emperor and empress are in front of her. The first one is called Laushan Jansen Illida, and his wife is Rosa Illida. The empress is the daughter of Count Michael, and she received her title 3 years ago. Also next to the emperor is a man clutching the hilt of a sword. This is the same Crown Prince Kyle Alexis, whose birthday is celebrated today. As a result, all the guests of honor have already gathered, and the congratulations can begin. The saint begins her speech in honor of the prince's 20th birthday and blesses him. After this, the emperor thanks her and asks her to raise her head. The girl listens to his request and thinks that Ariel and Kyle's relationship has always been so-so. However, now his face does not even hide the strong hatred towards her. But the girl decides not to pay attention to this and continues her speech. It tells how God created the world and divided it into 9 parts. His mercy fell upon the empire and made the place prosperous. Then a brave emperor was chosen, and his son was born with the blessing of the god of destruction, Ciel. And now the saint congratulates the prince, who is the only heir. Not only the god of destruction, but also the other 8 gods bless him. At that moment, Ariel feels like she's being stared at. She even apologizes mentally, but she is now much worse off than the prince. After this, Kyle finally puts his hand into the girl's palms. Now she can kiss her and thus convey blessings. However, the girl herself considers this a humiliation in front of a huge crowd of people. It's good that she didn't make any mistakes, although it wasn't a pleasant task. At this moment, Kyle still does not soften his hateful gaze and looks at the girl. But suddenly there is some kind of explosion and Ariel is thrown aside. It was so loud that everyone in the room fell out of their seats. After everything has calmed down, Ariel tries to see what happened. But she can't understand anything because Kyle is standing in front of her, holding his sword. The man tries to spot the danger but finds nothing. Now the emperor himself demands a report on what is happening. At this moment, his guards report that it was lightning. She struck the statue of the first emperor and destroyed it. Ariel was very upset by this news as it was impossible. As a result, the bronze statue was completely destroyed by such force. After this, the empress grabs her head and understands that this is a bad sign. And while everyone is trying to suppress their panic, Ariel looks at the hole in the ceiling. There is not a single cloud in the sky at this time, which means that lightning did not strike without reason. The girl understands that this is the work of the god Hesed and asks him about it. It turns out he felt injustice and accidentally struck by lightning. Ariel understands that there will be a fuss about this and she won't survive. She then decides to look at people and listen to their reactions to this phenomenon. All the people begin to whisper and consider this a bad omen, The emperor's statue is reduced to rubble, which is not to the crown prince's advantage. After all, everyone begins to believe that after he ascends to the throne, the empire will also collapse. But now Ariel is also bothered by a strange feeling in her chest that she feels when she looks at the prince. At this moment, she is distracted by a voice nearby, to which the girl turns around. The empress begins to exclaim that the saint herself has honored them with her visit today. This means that there is no reason for the gods to be angry with them. But Ariel immediately realizes that the emperor's new wife and the prince do not get along very well. However, the situation with the people is really difficult and can create danger. Moreover, everything happened immediately after her words, and Kyle might hold a grudge. After this, the emperor asks the saint to pray for the empire when she returns to the temple. But Ariel decides to fix everything right now and turns to the crown prince. She then says that she will convey to the gods that he is happy. This puzzles Kyle, and he asks the saint about it again. And Ariel explains that the prince was born under the star of Ciel, the god of destruction. But destruction and creation always go hand in hand, and this is the mother of all things. However, the empress considers this nonsense and does not understand what she wants to say. And only her husband realizes that this is about Ciel's blessing. At this moment, all the people began to rejoice, as lightning was a sign of divine power. And Ariel adds that this is how God wanted to congratulate the prince. And his desire was so strong that he could not contain his joy. Once the situation was resolved, Ariel decided to go out and get some air. Now we need to ask the gods to stop doing this. It is also worth finding out what kind of relationship the prince has with the empress and returning to the temple. But suddenly, Prince Kyle comes out onto her balcony and disconcerts her with his appearance. He is stern and unhappy that the saint is going to leave the festival. This reaction shocks Ariel, and she doesn't understand what's wrong with this prince. He looks at her with such hatred and at the same time does not want her to leave. And Kyle reports that today the girl is a little different from her usual self. After this, Ariel asks what exactly the prince means. He is surprised that the saint solved such a problem on her own and that she is like a different person. The girl explains that her lifestyle was idle and she decided to change it. At this point, Kyle looks at her sternly again and says that he believes her. But then she must explain herself to him, and this discourages the saint. Seeing the girl's reaction, the prince takes a letter out of his breast pocket. Just recently, he received it from Ariel, who proposes marriage to him. This news makes the girl almost burn with shame for her heroine. How could the real Ariel do such a thing and go so far? Even the prince does not understand how the girl could forget about her duty as a saint. The heroine decides to calm down and realizes that the letter is written in a rather childish manner. On the one hand, Kyle can gracefully refuse her such an offer. But on the other hand, his refusal may be rude and even dangerous. So Ariel decides to at least somehow justify this first. She tells him it was just a mistake, but for some reason Kyle's gaze turns stern. Ariel feels a lot of pressure from him and continues to make excuses. She reports that the alcohol she drank that day was to blame. The girl was out of her mind when she wrote this and even managed to send the letter. Ariel is very sorry and asks you to forget about this mistake, taking into account the help provided today. But Kyle doesn't understand how a mistake can be so sincere. After this, he takes a few steps towards the girl and says that he is shocked. He then touches his finger to her lips and says that she missed him every night. Ariel even wrote that she would be very happy if the prince accepted her proposal. All this was laid out in her letter and in precise detail. At this moment, our heroine is ready to sink into the ground from shame for the real Ariel. Why did she write this to the prince who was obsessed with her? And why didn't she immediately go to the temple? Meanwhile, Kyle shows her the entire 8-page story. Ariel explains that she drank a whole barrel of wine and doesn't even remember anything. But the prince is sure that people become honest when they drink. They start talking about their deepest desires, and this confuses the girl. Therefore, she decides to give up all attempts to justify herself and asks to simply forget about it. She also apologizes and promises to be stricter with herself. However, the prince is not at all happy with her idea and says that the girl is simply making fun of him. Ariel never expected such a reaction, especially after her help today. The situation is further complicated by the fact that the prince grabs the girl's wrist with force. She can't even imagine how many nights he didn't sleep after her letter. The prince is outraged that the saint now blames alcohol for everything. All his screams and anger cause great fear in Ariel. But at that moment, an explosion from a lightning strike occurs next to them. After this, drops of water appear in the air, which look like a fountain. They gather right above their heads and pour down as rain. Not only Ariel, but also the crown prince is shocked by what happened. At this moment, he even lets go of the girl's hand and stops screaming. The saint decides not to miss the moment and abruptly runs away from the offender. She reaches the carriage and sees Dwayne nearby, who is surprised by her haste. Ariel, meanwhile, shouts that this is an emergency evacuation and runs inside. The carriage door slams shut and the girl feels safe. Now she can finally breathe a sigh of relief and relax. She looks at the imperial palace in the distance and tries to come to her senses. The girl is so glad that she was able to survive and is grateful to the lightning that saved her. After this, she decides to ask Hesed if this was his doing. He winks at her in messages, and Ariel thanks him for his help. At this moment, the god of love praises Hesed, and Monty regrets having condemned him. Ariel then notices a letter for Kyle in her hands, which she accidentally took with her. The enraged face of the crown prince immediately pops into her mind. After this, the girl begins to blush with furious shame. She's almost going crazy with how awkward this situation makes her. The actions of the real Ariel changed everything much more than the heroine thought. Now it becomes very dangerous and we need to try even harder. Sometime later, an auction takes place at which Count Balmer's jug is sold. Once upon a time, holy water from the ancient Eurus temple was kept in it. The starting price for this jug is 100 francs and people are starting to raise their signs. The price gradually rises and the lot is sold for 200 francs. But the saint does not understand why she is here, and it turns out that this was the wish of the god of arts. Even Dwayne asks her this question, as he does not understand the reason for their arrival. However, Ariel does not lose her head and says that everything is the will of the gods. Moreover, she has one reason why she ended up here. In fact, sometimes purchased trinkets make their owners millionaires. And Ariel decides to take advantage of this, not leaving anything to chance. After all, she has a god of art who will help her choose a valuable lot. And as soon as such an object appears, Monty will inform the saint about it. At this moment, the next lot, belonging to Countess Altmer, is announced. Ariel receives a notification that Monty is looking at this dagger. It is made of bronze and dragon bones and contains divine power. But the saint does not think that this dagger contains a large amount of dragon bones. It was probably easy to guess that they use the same tricks here as in regular goods. However, since the god of arts is looking intently at the dagger, it is worth thinking about. Meanwhile, people are actively raising the price, and Monty still hasn't given his verdict. Ariel is already starting to get nervous and is barely holding back her patience. Then she loses her temper and asks God to somehow speed up. At that moment, a notification appears before her eyes that Monty wants this dagger. Ariel doesn't hesitate and immediately raises her sign. She raises the price to 100 francs and prepares to buy the item. No one dares to raise the price any higher, and the dagger now belongs to the saint. The girl is very happy about this and feels how exciting it was. Ariel then turns to her escort and asks him to go somewhere. She had some important business to attend to that shouldn't take much time. Together with Dwayne, they find themselves in the middle of the street and the men recognize this place. Ariel brought him to the Merchants Guild, but it is still unclear why. The most influential guild owner is one of the three main male characters, Cass Lloyd. He is the only one who had no connection with Ariel, and I would not want to cross paths with him. But this trade guild contains the most talented appraisers, so she decides to use their services and gets an item for sale. Ariel lays out the dagger and wants to know how much it will be valued at. You can't tell from the outside that it's expensive, but God wouldn't lie. At this point, the appraiser declares that he will take 5 francs for the appraisal without a sale. The girl agrees to this price and the man starts working. Meanwhile, Ariel begins to look at the guild's display windows. Even their range of products is on another level, and you can feel their professionalism. Suddenly, the appraiser finishes his work and says that this is a good specimen. Oddly enough, this dagger has a fairly high dragon bone content. Ariel is incredibly happy with these words, and even Monty shrugs his shoulders in the notification. After this, the girl decides to find out how much the valuable item is worth. And the man explains that, taking into account all the characteristics, its price is 300 francs. Ariel is delighted by this news, as the price turned out to be quite high. Even Dwayne can't figure out how the girl knew about the item's value. And she honestly admits that God helped her with this, and Monty remains pleased with her sincerity. After this, she immediately decides to sell the item and shakes the appraiser's hand. He thanks her for the deal and prepares to bring the money. At this point, Ariel receives a notification that the shop feature is now unlocked for her. After some time, Ariel returns to the temple, where Anna meets her. The girl was on a 5-day training to serve as a saint, and now she has finished it and can begin her duties. Anna takes the saint's hand and promises that she can now rely on her. The girl will try, and this will cause pleasant feelings in Ariel. After this, she asks to bring her violet pie and apple tea. Anna acts in such a way that Ariel feels like she is her little sister. But now she needs to take care of some business, and the girl sits down at the table. At this point, she looks at the notification and decides to figure out the store function. If you think about it, in the very beginning she could speak with the gods through prophecies. But due to her low level, it seems that not all gods can dialogue with her. Thanks to their help, Ariel can improve her abilities. Monty can also help her with the auction, and now there is a store. Suddenly, a multitude of blue windows appear in front of the girl. This surprises her greatly, as she is already accustomed to windows in the form of a game chat. But Ariel couldn't even imagine something like this. The interface still looks like a game, and you can figure it out. At this moment, the saint decides to check everything and presses the board. She sees that she has 0 francs in her account, and in that case, the store is of no use. But at the same time, she is offered to collect the reward for opening the store. Ariel receives a multifunctional sum, and a blue bag appears in front of her. But inside, she feels completely empty and doesn't understand what to do with it. Suddenly, the heroine realizes how this can be used and decides to try it. The girl takes out her real coins and puts them in her bag. After this, 500 francs appear in her account, and now it is clear how to deposit money into the account. The replenishment problem has been resolved, but many items remain blocked. Perhaps this has something to do with her low level of prophecy. But now at least she has access to simple items and minor potions. However, this doesn't seem particularly useful, and it would be worth increasing the strength somehow. Ariel begins scrolling through the board to get a better understanding of the interface. It turns out that this is a store of magical items, and she should open as many as possible. In this case, Ariel's only option is to invest all her savings in the store. But the god of art is not pleased with her ambitions, since the value of art is not in materiality. However, Ariel reminds him that he was the happiest at the auction. After this, she receives notification that the gods have decided to entrust her with a secret mission. She needs to prove her loyalty by collecting funds. She is then asked to give all the money from the multifunctional bag. Ariel is ready to cry at this news, since this is all her savings. If the gods only knew how difficult it was to hide this money from Ray House. But even though they behave like little children, they are still not bad. Moreover, the gods have always helped Ariel, and it is unlikely that this sacrifice will harm her. And in this case, the girl is ready to say goodbye to her savings. Therefore, she replies that she is ready to give all the money and sacrifice it to the gods. At this moment, the multifunctional wallet begins to hover above her hands, and all funds are debited from the account. Ariel is very upset by this, but believes that she has paid for helping the gods. Suddenly, a message appears in front of her that she has given away the most precious thing at the moment. Therefore, the 3 gods are ready to share their divine power with her. The saint's body was chosen as a receptacle, and the divine power was unlocked. Ariel feels so warm at this moment, as if she were sitting by the fireplace. A bright glow appears around her, penetrating every cell of the heroine. And the girl feels how this warmth gets inside her body. After this, everything disappears, and Ariel tries to understand what has changed. She looks at her hands but feels nothing new. Ariel is still waiting for something to happen, but there is silence all around. Suddenly, all the gods congratulate her on receiving divine powers. Ariel finally feels the thrill of it all, and her thoughts come into order. Now even the interior of her room seems completely ordinary and not so luxurious to her. Because of Monty, the god of the arts, she sees every flaw that catches her eye. I wonder how the blessing of Odysseus, the god of love, will feel. After all, she doesn't even have a boyfriend, and Ariel has never really experienced love. Yet it is strange, since others can only use the power of one god. But with her, everything is different and her power has no limits, just like the Bergerites. However, Ariel is hearing about her for the first time, and she herself is not a real saint. And when the main character appears, she will need to free up this place. But this power is so similar to the divine, and everything seems so real. The girl doesn't understand what's going on and how to explain it. Suddenly, at this moment, Rayhouse enters the room and finds the saint in an upset state. He is concerned about her behavior, but Ariel informs him that she is just a little busy. At this moment, the girl opens her eyes and finally understands who is standing in front of her. The saint did not expect to see Rayhouse so suddenly and panics. After all, the high priest himself stands before her, and he must be treated with respect. Ariel tries to justify herself and says that she mistook him for Anna. But why did Rayhouse decide to visit her so suddenly? The girl can't shake the feeling that the high priest didn't come for no reason. Maybe he found out her secret and is aware of her plans to save money. Did Dwayne really tell him about the dagger she bought at auction? Selling things and secretly saving money is almost like running away in the middle of the night. Moreover, the girl notices that Rayhouse keeps his hand on his sword all the time. At that moment, he starts talking and Ariel's heart skips a beat. She doesn't understand what they're talking about and tries to ask the man again. Rayhouse explains that he is not against communicating informally. This news discourages the girl, as she certainly did not expect this. After all, she can't allow herself to do this, especially with someone who will soon kill her. But she replies to Rayhouse that it is impossible to speak on equal terms with the high priest. However, the man stands his ground and asks to be called by his name. Ariel looks closely at the man and sees that he doesn't seem drunk. So what made him ask her to communicate informally in that case? Besides, the high priest is very serious and Ariel doesn't know how to react. Then she notices that his cheeks are red and she doesn't understand when it appeared. And if you think about it, arguing with the high priest is also a bad idea. So Ariel decides to accept his request and calls him Mr. Rayhouse. But he asks her not to use the console, and the girl decides to take time to think. At this moment, the high priest begins to blush and feels ashamed. He explains that he wanted to say something completely different, but it just slipped out. Ariel decides that something is bothering Rayhouse, but he denies it. The man came just to say hello, but a strange feeling appeared in his heart. He doesn't understand how he can feel this way towards someone he usually couldn't stand. After this, Rayhouse leans towards Ariel and tells her how much he missed her. But the girl does not reciprocate his feelings and asks him to stop doing this. At this moment, the high priest stops and clenches his fist in tension. He then apologizes to the girl and promises to come back later. Rayhouse leaves and slams the door behind him, leaving the saint alone with herself. Meanwhile, she is trying to understand what happened to the man. Suddenly, a notification from the gods appears, distracting Ariel from her thoughts. And the girl is dissatisfied with the incomprehensible words that Odysseus is pleased with Rayhouse's strength of spirit. Following this, more messages pour in which the gods regard the man as a holy husband. They start arguing among themselves, and Ariel is unhappy with their reasoning. At this moment, there is a knock on the door, but the girl is no longer happy to have guests. However, it turns out to be Anna, who brought tea for the saint. At the same time, the tray is filled with the sweets that Ariel has been waiting for. And at this moment, Anna turns her attention to the saint and notices changes. Then she says that even though it may sound stupid, the lady is completely different today. She has become even more beautiful than usual and looks simply amazing. You could even say that the person who doesn't love her when they meet will be strange. At this point, Ariel becomes discouraged and doesn't know how to react. She understands that all this is because of the blessing of the god of love, and that is why Rayhouse behaved this way. After this, she thanks Anna and asks to be left alone to read. The girl is about to leave and asks to call her if she needs anything. Meanwhile, Ariel put all the pieces together in her head and understood how the blessing works. At this point, Ray House is trying to understand the reason for his behavior. He stands in front of the statue of his god and asks him questions about Ariel. He doesn't understand why he thought about such things around this girl. Maybe this is some kind of test or price for atonement for crimes. After this, he raises his head up and begins to pray. Ray House asks the god of art to hear his prayer and promises to be righteous. He also asks him to heal his sinful body with a blessing. And if Monty doesn't do this, then he won't be able to resist temptation, and he will no longer have the strength to endure being around this girl. Meanwhile, Anna walks with the saint and tells her about her popularity. After she started serving her, she was constantly asked a lot of questions. But Anna does not reveal details about the saint's preferences to anyone due to the rules of the temple. And if rumors suddenly start to spread about something, it will definitely not be because of Anna. However, Ariel didn't even think to doubt the girl and says that she believes her. And the saint is not going to change her mind, so she need not worry. Anna is very grateful to her mistress for her trust and says thank you to her. Meanwhile, Ariel thinks that the people in the temple continue to spread rumors. But perhaps under these circumstances, this can be considered normal. After receiving divine power, the saint regularly visits the library. This is necessary in order to find a way to replenish your own budget. The saint is the religious leader of the nation, and the palace and temple are the two pillars. The entire empire stands on them, and Ariel is at the top of the temple itself. However, the girl refused to participate in almost all events due to health reasons. Thus, she will not have the same popularity and influence as previous saints. It's strange that the temple didn't react to this in any way, but Reichhaus must resolve the problems that have arisen. Suddenly she clutches her head as the beautiful image of the high priest appears in her mind again. Ariel doesn't understand what's happening to her and why she has a strange feeling in her chest. However, she collects her thoughts and tells Anna that there is no point in proving anything to people. She doesn't care about the rumors they spread, and the maid doesn't have to worry about it. But Anna's reaction turns out to be unpredictable, and tears well up in her eyes. After this, the girl asks the saint for forgiveness for having spoken nonsense. However, Ariel rushes to reassure her and says that everything is fine. Suddenly, the saint notices the bushes next to her and is surprised. A bird just fell there, and Ariel decides to look at it. At this moment, Anna experiences real horror as she senses a bad omen. The bird turned out to be a bluewing, which, injured, fell onto the green grass. Ariel becomes sad because her injuries are very serious. She feels very sorry for this beautiful bird, which continues to flutter its wings. The girl is very familiar with this feeling when you are trying to survive. If she makes a mistake in this novel, the same fate awaits her. And the feeling of death before the soul leaves the body, she will never be able to forget. After this, Ariel takes the wounded bird in her hands, despite the fact that it is covered in blood. She doesn't care, because the life of any creature is much more valuable than dirty clothes. Then the saint begins to strongly desire for this bird to survive. At this moment, Anna notices an amazing phenomenon that happens to the lady. Her body begins to be covered with a divine power that resembles a strong wind. After this, Ariel opens her eyes and looks at the wounded bird. Some miracle happened, and all the blue fly's wounds instantly disappeared. At this moment, the bird begins to flutter again and easily flies upward. And Ariel suddenly receives a notification sent to her by the gods. The blue screen appears in front of her again and offers to collect the reward for using the Force. However, the saint is only now beginning to realize that she has saved the bird. And Anna witnessed how the girl used divine power. Although many priests heal people, it is still not so easy to do this even with prayers. But Ariel didn't use the Bible or prayer and performed such a miracle. This bird was already on the verge of death and then simply flew away as if nothing had happened. The saint understands that there is no way to convince Anna and puts her hand on her shoulder. The girl then strictly forbids her to tell anyone about this. But Anna is very surprised that the saint asks her to keep everything a secret. Previously, Ariel could only take risks because she already knew the future. However, if everything changes now due to divine power, her life could be in danger. In this world alien to her, her fate is in her own hands. Ariel wants a simple and peaceful life, so she asks Anna to promise to keep everything a secret. The girl feels that she has been entrusted with an important mission and accepts her mistress's request. She considers this a full-fledged order and promises not to tell anyone about what happened. At this moment, Ariel looks at the girl and feels that she can trust her. Then she decides to change the subject and asks Anna about a new variety of roses. At this time, Ray House is enjoying tea in the garden with a friend. He doesn't understand why he did this to the bluewing, which isn't even prey. And the high priest explains that the bird needs to be better trained so that it does not bite its owner. But his interlocutor, the heir of the Cass Lloyd Guild, does not agree with such methods. However, even if not with dogs, Ray House had done this many times before. At that moment, the dead maid Annie, whom he himself killed, appears in his head. Then the girl blackmailed Ariel that she would tell everyone her secret. And Ray House had to kill her so that she could no longer bite her owner. After this, he thanks Cass for saving the White Lawtonia. This plant is not suited to this climate and will not forget what its comrade did for it. And Cass replies that it's nothing and now the Ilium festival will be a success. However, he doesn't understand why such a hardened cracker as Ray House became interested in flowers. At this moment, a bluewing, which had been bitten by dogs, lands on his shoulder. And on her forehead there is a red spot, which is a special marking. This is definitely the bird that Cass chose, and it looks like it was cured by some high-ranking priest. And Ray House explains that this is like help from the god of mercy. But suddenly he turns his head and all his thoughts disappear. After all, in front of him appears Ariel, with whom they could not possibly cross paths. And the girl herself does not understand why the high priest is here. She decides that she needs to leave as quickly as possible and says goodbye to the man. But just as Ariel's about to turn around, Ray House starts talking. The girl understands that the escape has failed and blesses the high priest and his guest. Ray House bows back and wishes the girl the same. After this, he decides to introduce his guest to the saint and introduces her to Cass. But as soon as Ariel hears his name and realizes who it is, she panics. At this time, Cass Lloyd replies that it is a great honor for him to meet Saint Ilium. However, according to the plot of the novel, this character was not supposed to see Ariel. And the girl, out of politeness, greets the guest, and Ray House asks her about a walk in the garden. After all, she could have asked the high priest to accompany her. Ariel starts to smile widely and says that she can't distract such a busy man. Suddenly, someone distracts Ray House and informs him that something has happened. The servant approaches the high priest and begins to whisper something in his ear. Then the man says that there are problems with the construction and he needs to leave. Ariel considers this a stroke of luck and also decides to leave while she still has the chance. But before she can say goodbye, Cass decides to talk to her in Ray House's absence. Now her plan has completely failed and everything is going wrong again. Ariel silently looks at her interlocutor and examines him carefully. Meanwhile, Cass doesn't show any reaction and doesn't say a word. The girl doesn't understand what's wrong with him, and he looks scarier than Ray House. After this, she decides to turn to the man, and he turns his head in her direction. Ariel says that she needs to leave because she has important things to do, but at that moment, the very bird she had healed lands on her shoulder. Cass is very surprised that the girl has already seen the bluewing, and it has become attached to her. And Ariel explains that she accidentally bumped into her in the garden, and now they met again. But according to the Lord, the bird was trained to fly only to its owner, and this frightens the girl. It turns out that this bluewing belongs to Cass, and it is a miracle that it has become attached to the saint. Moreover, he already thought that the bird had died after being attacked by dogs. According to the novel, Ariel remembers that Cass is one of those people who measures everything in terms of money. He ignores the pain and feelings of others without feeling an ounce of compassion. Even pointing his sword at St. Camilla was no problem for him. All this is because this man has a piece of ice instead of a heart. At this point, he decides to directly ask Ariel how she saved the bird. The girl is shocked by his question and denies any involvement, and she is very outraged by how easy other people's lives are for the Lord. At this point, Cass wonders if Ariel herself has encountered death. But if he thinks that life is worthless, then he should have killed the bird and let it suffer. After these words, Cass realizes that the real Ariel is different from the rumors. However, the girl doesn't care and is glad that the bird is okay. And if Cass is her owner, then he should value her. At this moment, the girl announces her departure, and the bird again appears on the owner's shoulder. Finally, the man calls out to Ariel and says that he will look forward to their next meeting. After some time, our heroine finds herself in her room and plunges into thought. She was so outraged by Cass's attitude that she was not going to see him again. She already has enough of two men and doesn't need any extra problems. Now the most important thing is to escape from there as quickly as possible and live in peace. There is only one way to do this, and Ariel looks at the reward notification again. It appeared back when the girl used divine power for the bird. And since she needs money to escape, she agrees to take the reward. At this moment, she receives a message that the level of prophecy has been increased for completing the mission. Now the second level prophecy is revealed to her, and the god of destruction is connected to the messages. Suddenly, Ariel is once again surrounded by divine power, which is Ciel's blessing. After this, the girl feels changes in herself and remembers this god. This is the same Ciel who destroyed the statue during the birthday, and it is he who is worshipped by the crown prince, who did not give the girl a break. But if Ariel now received his blessing, then she has gained power. After this, she begins to think about how she can break one and test her ability. At this moment, a chair catches her eye, and the girl decides to use it. Ariel grabs his back with all her strength, but nothing happens. And she was already hoping that after the blessing, she would have special power. Suddenly, something she didn't expect happens, and the chair falls apart. After this, two halves of the broken object appear on the floor. Ariel is very shocked by what is happening, as none of this looks like a romantic fantasy. It turns out that the genre of the work in which she found herself has changed radically. After a while, the girl stretches, as she has finished reading a mortar of books. The blessing of Hesed helps her out greatly, and now she can read 10 large books a day. Ariel has already learned the basic information about this world and will not disappear when she escapes. I wonder if it will be possible to make money using divine power. After all, she can use it at any time and treat people for money. Or there is an option to use only herbs instead of strength and become a healer. One way or another, Ariel will need a job after escaping, and she chooses to become a doctor. But blessings have nuances, and they can last no more than 3 hours. Each one can only be used once a day, and she now has 4 of them. The god of knowledge Hesed helps in the ability to learn anything. And the god of arts, Monte, enhances his observation of luxury items. And there is also the god of love, Odysseus, who makes a girl more beautiful. At this moment, the pen she was using to take notes breaks in Ariel's hands. This is already the 3rd one due to the blessing of the god of destruction Ciel. Even Anna is concerned about the broken chair she found in the room, but Ariel hasn't used this power on people yet and doesn't know its consequences. However, everything she touches instantly becomes unusable due to breakdown. This means that now she can be fearless and can easily defend herself. The girl thanks Ciel for his blessing and he blushes in the message. And Ariel understands that this god really likes to be praised. But after this praise, the other gods begin to tell nasty things about Ciel. Our heroine gets the impression that they are beginning to envy him. Apparently, she hit the nail on the head and decides to rectify the situation. Ariel turns to the other gods and tells them that their blessings are also good. But this does not help her, since the gods still begin to argue about whose blessing is better. And the girl asks them to live in harmony, since they are all very important to her. At this moment, Anna knocks on the door of the room, and the saint allows her to enter. The servant apologizes and informs that Ariel has a guest asking to see her. It turns out that the crown prince came to her, and this news discourages the girl. She asks to convey that she is ill, and the man had better leave. But at that moment, Ariel hears his voice calling it a pretense. Kyle is already standing at her door, informing her that he has no desire to leave. Ariel immediately resorts to saintly etiquette and greets the prince, but he doesn't need these formalities, as he is eager to continue the unfinished conversation. After this, they go outside, where night has already fallen. Initially, the crown prince was not supposed to spend so much time with the saint, and she doesn't understand what he's going to talk about in such a quiet place. Even the gods send messages that they are holding their breath in anticipation, but Ariel decides to turn off the connection and not be distracted by their reaction. At this point, Kyle says that Ariel's pretense is pathetic. Last time he admired her acting talent, but today it was time to get straight to the point. And the Crown Prince says that he has come to warn the girl. At this time, Dwayne is talking to the High Priest and brings up the topic of Kyle. Although Ariel supports the Crown Prince, she still shouldn't protect him. Her blue eyes pop up in Ray House's head again, haunting him. Previously, he had guessed about the girl's feelings for the prince, but was it really love? If this isn't a test from the gods, then this girl is truly special. After this, Dwayne decides to tell why he is really here. The man reports to the High Priest that the Crown Prince has come to visit the saint, and the thought that Ariel is now with another man drives him crazy. After this, he turns to Dwayne to find out the details. Ray House's gaze becomes wild, and he wants to hear where the saint is now. Meanwhile, Kyle tells Ariel the information he received after the banquet. The Empress's brother Michael cooperates with the temple servants and learned this from them. It seems that these people are digging under the saint, and he cannot intervene for political reasons. Ariel understands that it was inevitable, although her appearance calmed the hearts of the worried people. Prince Kyle took advantage of this 2 years ago and thus strengthened his position with Ray House. Even at the last banquet, she supported him, and the Empress will decide to sniff out everything about her. However, Ariel does not remember such a plot in the novel, and Ariel did not meet Kyle for this reason. It seems that history is starting to change and is becoming very dangerous. Now she is interested in the details, but her enemies are only just looking for a person to spy on. It's strange, because Kyle said that the saint has been under surveillance for some time. However, the whole point is that Alberto's informant has disappeared somewhere. He has been very aggressive lately, and the spy decided to go into hiding. However, they may have already learned something important, and it cannot be left unnoticed. But Ariel has no ideas on this matter, and Kyle asks her to be careful. After this, the girl decides to contact the prince before he leaves. She wants to ask him to do something important, and this surprises the man. Ariel starts from afar and reminds the prince that he is the rightful heir to the throne. And in time, he will become the one who will subjugate the great power of the empire and lead the entire continent. Ariel then raises her finger up, as if to speak of the prince's great achievement. She has already helped him once, and now asks him to exercise her right of partnership. Kyle decides that the girl wants to propose to him again, but she asks him not to joke like that anymore. She has only one request, and it concerns her personal protection from enemies. At this moment, the prince's gaze becomes even more serious, and Ariel explains that she wants to survive, especially if she becomes his ally. Even if they are in the same boat, it does not guarantee that everything will end well. The false saint was needed only to stabilize the mood in the country. If someone finds out the truth, there will be no reason to keep her alive. Moreover, Ariel works hard to support the empire, and for this she would like to receive the right to a quiet life while they are on the same side. So the girl asks him to promise her that Kyle will protect her. After these words, Kyle gives in and agrees to Ariel's request. He places his hand over his heart and vows not to kill her unless she becomes an enemy. This oath calms the girl, and she thanks the Crown Prince. And he is surprised that after this promise, Ariel felt better. After all, the letter with the proposal looked like she wanted to commit suicide. And coming closer to her, Kyle asks what she was thinking about at that moment. In this letter, the girl confessed her love and wanted to be on his side. The prince then touches her neck and reminds her how much she has been looking forward to this. So could it be that everything she wrote was a lie, which she doesn't even remember? But now it was time to continue where they left off last time. However, Ariel reiterates that she was drunk when she wrote this letter. Suddenly she hears a male voice greeting His Highness. The girl knows him well, and she doesn't know whether to be happy or panic. And at that moment, the man reports that it seemed to him that the prince's arrival was connected with a visit to him. But I wonder what Kyle and the saint are doing in such a quiet and dark place. Ariel didn't expect to see Rayhouse, but according to the rules of etiquette, she greets him. Kyle didn't even blink an eye and was about to explain everything to the High Priest. There are things that he and Ariel didn't have time to discuss at the party. However, our heroine cannot allow Rayhouse to find out the truth and says that it is about the food at the banquet. There are a lot of complaints about this, as a lot of stale products were found. But they had already finished talking, and Rayhouse decided to warn the couple. After all, the saint belongs to the temple, and it is better to avoid personal meetings with her. And first of all, this concerns Ariel, who needs to take better care of herself. At this time, the girl does not understand why the High Priest is provoking Kyle, but accepts his reproach, and the Crown Prince is outraged that someone decided to control the saint's affairs. To this, Rayhouse replies that he is always ready to deal with dangerous cases. And because of the incident at the banquet, some nobles paid undue attention to the saint. But these words only amuse the Crown Prince and make him smile. After this, a sharp blade from his sword sticks to Rayhouse's throat. At the same time, the High Priest cannot do anything and is one step away from death. And Kyle explains that by talking about the danger, he should have foreseen this scenario. And his principles do not allow him to let the misdeeds of arrogant people go unpunished. Ariel at this time cannot hide her tension from the situation that has arisen. The Lord is only interested in whether Rayhouse would like to know anything else besides the saint and the temple. After all, whether it's an official meeting or a personal one, he will not allow anyone to show arrogance. After this, the High Priest puts on a smile and says that he understands everything. Kyle removes the sword from his neck, and the situation stops escalating so much. Meanwhile, Ariel is beside herself with the fact that there are no normal people at all in the temple. But she has the opportunity to take advantage of Monty's help and leave this place. But Rayhouse himself asks her to go back and rest, as she is clearly tired. The High Priest wants to continue the conversation with Kyle, and therefore escorts the girl. And having already returned to the room, Anna greets her mistress with questions about the prince. The girl thought it must have been amazing, but she didn't expect to see the saint without strength. Ariel is so tired of sorting things out that she still can't come to her senses. Anna decides to find out what happened, although she expected to see her hostess full of happiness. But Ariel doesn't understand why her maid came to such a conclusion. It turns out that she knows that the saint is in love with the Crown Prince. The heroine experiences terrible shock from this news and thinks that the whole temple thinks so. But the real Ariel always looked forward to meeting the prince and even sang about it during her walks. Wherever she went, she always talked only about Kyle, and our heroine was ready to burn with shame. Now it is clear why Rayhouse reacted this way to the prince's arrival. And his direct question about love for Kyle is connected precisely with Ariel's behavior. Our heroine thought that everything was limited to just letters, but the story spread. It all reached the point of absurdity, and Rayhouse probably heard something exaggerated. Now she understands why his behavior changes after the mention of the prince. Ariel is sad that the real heroine has done bad things, and she needs to somehow fix it. Therefore, the girl decides to change her strategy, and Anna tries to understand what the saint has in mind. And Ariel reminds her that she asked her not to tell anything about her. But now it would be better if the maid, on the contrary, spread a few rumors. Anna agrees to fulfill her request, and the saint conveys all the words to her. The girl wants everyone to know that Ariel wants to live alone and has no plans to get married. However, Anna is very worried, because then the saint will have no suitors. But previous saints married aristocrats and left the temple, but she has other plans. So she thanks Anna in advance and asks her to tell her story about her loneliness. At the same time, Ariel wants the girl to hurry and shows her out the door. She can only entrust this mission to her faithful servant and assures her that everything will be fine. After this, Ariel goes to bed and is confident that she will soon get rid of her admirers. Moreover, what she wants most of all is to live in luxury after leaving the temple. And while the girl is peacefully falling asleep, some voices try to wake her up. These creatures are greatly disturbed by the explosion and ask the saint to wake up. Ariel sleepily replies that she will sleep for another minute, but the voices do not subside. After all, if the server goes down, it will be the saint who will have to bear responsibility for it. At this moment, Ariel begins to come to her senses and does not understand where these children's voices are coming from in her room. And at this time, they are very excited about the gods throwing lightning bolts. Ariel is horrified by the sudden appearance of the children and their news. She doesn't understand what's going on at all, and the entities ask her to calm the gods. After all, if the saint doesn't intervene, then soon everything here will explode. So first they ask her to sign it in the document and then sort everything out. At the same time, they ask sleepy Ariel to speed up, since there is very little time. However, the girl sees a completely blank sheet of paper in front of her and does not understand anything. But she still puts her signature, and the children find it completely insincere. After this, they begin to argue about which frame to choose for the document. But the saint still cannot understand anything and asks the children to introduce themselves. Moreover, she does not understand the place where she found herself and the reason why this happened. And the children explain that even with divine power, time in spiritual form is limited. And they are the rulers who separated from the primeval god. One of them is called Ren and the other is Pen, and they control this system. And it was they who brought the wandering soul of our heroine here. This happened at the moment when the girl fell asleep and did not even suspect anything. Managers don't usually do this, but now they have no other choice. The gods show too much interest in the saint, and Ariel begins to blame them for this. Since they were managers, she had a lot of questions for them. She feels like a guinea pig and doesn't understand anything. Moreover, the heroine is outraged that the prophecy appeared without warning. To this, Ren replies that the gods are ready to eat her soul alive and then receives a kick. Pen asks the saint not to pay attention to him, since he only pays attention to appearance. However, she cannot name the true reason for what happened. At this moment, lightning starts appearing everywhere and striking the server. Ariel never expected to see this phenomenon and falls into a stupor. But this is exactly what Pen was talking about, and the problem still remains unresolved. The gods are in great anger and attack the system with their lightning. However, Ariel doesn't understand why they are angry and what provoked them. The girl begins to replay recent events and remembers the conversation with Anna. Before that, she met Kyle and Rayhouse, who clearly don't get along with each other. And not long before this, the girl turned off the broadcast so that no one could see her actions. Now she understands what caused the anger of the gods, although she had the right to do so. After the broadcast was turned off, they could no longer watch anything. Usually they just lose interest in such situations, but here they got angry at the system. That's why the managers want Ariel to continue broadcasting before it's too late. After this, the girl pauses and thinks about something. Then the saint asks what will happen if she still refuses the broadcast. This comes as a great shock to Pen, as they had not expected to be refused. But Ariel explains that she promises to think about it if they answer her questions. And the managers are shocked by her behavior and impudence because the system is a huge blessing. However, the saint does not give up and replies that it is up to her to decide. And if the managers have something against it, they can say so. And the entities understand that they no longer have any other choice and agree to answer her questions. The next day, Ariel finishes her business and is about to turn on the broadcast again. After this, she is bombarded with numerous notifications from displeased gods. And Hesed has prepared many lightning bolts, and he even has something to say. Ariel realizes that the destruction was his fault and decides to negotiate with him. She asks for permission to turn it off, but he shakes his head categorically. Then the saint explains that she has the right to her private life. This is necessary because she is embarrassed to show some of her moments. After this, all the gods begin to remember a similar feeling and understand Ariel. And from this moment on, she can turn off the prophecy whenever necessary. For example, a girl does this in the bathroom, and the god of knowledge gives his consent. Ariel asks them not to be angry about the short breaks, as the prophecy is still active. And especially she asks to refrain from the wrath of Hesed, which scatters lightning. In response to this, the god of knowledge sadly nods his head, since this is his doing. Now Ariel is content with being the dominant one in their relationship. However, the god of love reports that he is dissatisfied with what the saint said. But Ariel already understands that it is impossible to make him understand her. Then she remembers that she has something for the gods and they become interested. Balance is important in any relationship, and the girl prepared bracelets to express respect. She is not good at jewelry, and that is why they are not very beautiful. But this is how Ariel would like to thank the gods. Afterwards, she looks at the empty board and thinks that her handiwork is too simple for them. However, suddenly the bracelets in her hand begin to glow with divine power. At that very moment, this power covers the entire girl, and this sight impresses her. She then receives messages that the gods are touched, and that this is a priceless gift for them. But at that moment, they immediately start arguing about whose bracelet is better. After this, Ariel remembers how Ren and Pen answered her questions. The managers were excited by her interest, as such information was only available to the administration. But she wants to know why she was turned into Ariel, and Pen replies that it wasn't their choice. In that case, she is interested in what will happen if she stays in this novel. However, the managers do not understand what is being discussed and are shocked by the girl's question. And she explains that she has read this book before, and in it the main character Camilla is connected with 3 male characters. And the fake Saint Ariel, according to the plot, wants to take her place. At this point, Ren stops her and asks if there were demons in the book. But the heroine replies that the plot was based on romance and there was nothing about demons. After this, the managers realize that the plot is very similar and the prophecy may come true. At this point, the intrigue mounts and Ariel demands that everything be explained to her. It turns out that what the heroine read was a prophecy, which is only a small part of it. It turns out that this was not an ordinary novel, and a prophecy about this system appeared in the heroine's world. And after her death, she ended up in the body of the false Saint Ariel. But usually prophecies come true, and in this case she too will have to die. However, our heroine is not a real saint, and she has a chance. Since her soul from another world ended up in Ariel's body, she can change her destiny. The book was imbued with the power of prophecy, and someone's hopes were placed into it. The girl clings to this unknown person, but the managers can't say anything more. All that matters now is that the prophecy was distorted, and the heroine changed everything. However, they cannot say more, as it will affect the future. And no matter how the saint tried to ask more questions, the managers said goodbye to her and disappeared. After this, a sunny and serene morning dawns in the Ilium Temple. That day, Ariel decided to make some extra money again and made a lot of deals. Along with Dwayne, she carries a valuable item that she intends to sell. He considers her very lucky, but the saint explains that the gods help her in everything. Even all her money is not enough to escape from the temple, and she is grateful for Monte's help. Today she managed to buy a lot of valuable things at auction. If the purchase is successful, Ariel will hit the jackpot. After that, she again visits the trading guild where she was last time. The saint throws a hood over her head and carefully goes inside. At this moment, she finds a scandalous visitor who demands to exchange the item for chromium. But he is denied this, since the chromium is illegal and the guild does not conduct such transactions. And Ariel looks at the customer's platinum chain, which he is trying to sell. However, Dwayne distracts her and tells her that the chromium is related to opium. It is sometimes used as a painkiller, but is more often sold as a narcotic. At this point, the visitor slams her fist on the table and starts hurling threats at the seller. She promises that everyone will regret this and rushes out of the guild, nearly knocking Ariel off her feet. At this moment, the girl remembers that she has already seen this face. Could this really be the Empress's maid who needed a drug? Meanwhile, she promises that God will not leave this guild alone. After this, the girl leaves, and those present try to recover from the shock. Then another man comes out to the cellar and praises him for solving the problem. But Ariel never expected to meet her recent acquaintance here. It turns out to be Lord Cass, who is very interested in what the girl is doing here. Together with Dwayne, they greet the Marquis and Ariel explains that she came here to sell items. After this, the Lord turns to the seller and asks if this is true. And he reports that the saint had already engaged in a similar sale before, and she was not lying. Ariel claims that she decided to sell her things because she doesn't need them. But some people might find all this useful, and that's why this is the best solution. One gets the impression that the Lord believed the girl and calmed down. But suddenly he decides to see what items the saint decided to sell. Cass notices a pendant with a gemstone that looks familiar to him. He then decides to check whether this necklace actually once belonged to the saint. Ariel is a little puzzled by his question because she can't tell the whole truth. After all, then he will have to find out that she buys things at auction and sells them at a markup. And while the girl wants to get rid of the Lord's company as soon as possible, he is going to buy her necklace. The man is serious and names a sum that seems very large. He is ready to buy a valuable item for 10,000 francs, and Ariel is speechless. Everyone froze in place at the high price the Lord had named. And he explains that this is exactly how much the necklace that the saint is offering costs. But the girl still doesn't believe it, and it seems to her that Cass is joking. At this point, the seller joins the conversation and says that the top price for this pendant is 600 francs. Ariel realizes that this is more likely to be true and that you can live for 10 years on 10,000. But why is the Lord willing to pay such a sum instead of 600? At this point, Dwayne asks the saint to agree, as this is an excellent offer. But Ariel is in no hurry to do this and decides to think everything over first. She then tells the Lord that she has changed her mind about selling the necklace. The girl decided not to accept Cass's offer and got out of the situation. She asks the appraiser to tell her the value of the other items, but not to touch the necklace. But even Dwayne is shocked by her decision and asks her to think again. However, Ariel is already determined and repeats again that she will not sell the necklace. Dwayne may have bought into the profit motive, but the girl is trying to think pragmatically. Sure, the price of 10,000 seems attractive, but she doesn't want to get involved with Cass. After all, this is a cunning fox who probably has something planned against her. However, the man returns the girl's item without any problems. He explains that he hoped to become closer to the saint through this deal. Moreover, he praises her observation skills, since the necklace used to belong to the imperial family. It is a valuable gift that the former empress gave to the current one. Cass doesn't know how the saint got hold of this item, but recommends not selling it. He advises keeping it in a safe place or getting rid of it so that no one can contact the girl. Ariel clutches the necklace in her hands and, puzzled, thanks the man for the advice. After this, he leaves and adds that he would like to know more about the girl. But apparently this time fate did not smile on him, and he will have to try again. And turning to the saint one last time, he wishes her a safe journey home. Once inside the temple, Ariel loudly expresses her indignation at what happened. She accuses the god Monty of slipping her the stolen jewelry. But he doesn't see the difference because it still remains a work of art. However, on top of this, he slipped in a statue that was not even appreciated. In the end, Ariel spent 900 francs on all 4 items, but only earned 300. However, if Cass had not stopped her, she would have been able to get more money. Besides, Lloyd is not the kind of person to get involved in a loss-making business. But in the end, it was he who offered the best price, and Ariel could have made a nice profit from it. Now in the future, we need to be more careful with such things. At this point, Ariel checks her balance and realizes that it's not very rich. She is already thinking about returning to the store and accepting the Lord's offer. However, it would look very stupid, and she would be lucky if Cass didn't kick her out right away. After this, Ariel opens the door to her room and sees something she didn't expect. Ray House is standing next to her table, clearly waiting for the girl for a long time. He is glad to see her back, although he is concerned about her leaving the temple. Besides, his face reveals that he has many questions about her absence. Ariel is very shocked by Ray House's appearance and doesn't understand what he's doing here. After this, she greets the high priest, as required by etiquette. And he reports that he heard about her recently being involved in some interesting things. And now he wonders why Ariel suddenly started saving money. It might be because she's planning to escape from the temple. In the original story of the novel, there are 3 main male characters. One of them is a swordmaster with an icy heart, but is the best warrior in the Empire. This is Prince Kyle, who is completely dedicated to protecting Camilla. Another hero owns a merchant guild and is considered the smartest man in the Empire. Despite his calculating nature, Cass Lloyd still fell in love with Camilla and was ready to give her everything. And the third hero is the High Priest, who has a strong sense of justice. Upon meeting Camilla, Ray House began to pray with all his heart for her well-being. And all these men had one thing in common: they had devoted love for Camilla. Besides this, they also strongly hated the false Saint Ariel. And her last line of salvation was the purchase of a house, which was almost cut off. What should Ariel do now, if even in the original version everything was not so confusing? At this point, she informs Rayhouse that the saint cannot leave the temple, and she was just thinking about buying a villa nearby. She is, of course, comfortable in the temple, but sometimes she wants to be alone with her thoughts. She hopes that Rayhouse will understand her and believe her story. And to her great surprise, the high priest agrees to her wish. After all, sometimes it really is nice to spend time just the two of you. But Ariel didn't even notice how she began to repeat his phrase. After this, she silently begins to think about what was said, and finally the meaning dawns on her. The girl realizes that she has just agreed to spend time alone with Rayhouse. He is amused by the saint's reaction and asks her not to worry, as he will simply be there and support her. He just asks her to be careful when going outside. The man even promises to strengthen her security, but Ariel tries to dissuade him. However, he considers the saint a very important person and does not want to risk her safety. And touching her hair, Rayhouse explains that he wants to protect her body from any scratch. Therefore, she needs to be very careful, and this is his main request. However, Ariel persuades him not to worry so much. And Rayhouse reminds the girl that she just returned and must be tired. So he leaves so that the saint can rest peacefully in her room. At this moment, she tries to understand what is happening to the man and why he is behaving this way. In the book, he wasn't such a character, and most likely Odysseus made something up. Now the high priest simply went and trampled on her dream of escaping and living the rest of her days carefree. But immediately she receives a message from the gods that Odysseus has nothing to do with it. After that, they begin to advise her on other ways to save money. However, Ariel is confident that these three heroes will not treat her the same way as Camilla. Moreover, she didn't plan to take the place of the main character at all. While all three are very attractive characters, Ariel has other plans. The first thing she thinks about is how to survive without having 3 swords in her stomach. And these gods are already dreaming of gifts from these heroes and irritating the saint with this. She is even surprised that they seem to hear her thoughts and react to them. After some time, a large number of people gather in the market square. Many girls and men came there to buy goods. Anna also found herself at this market and admires its excellence. The girl can't contain her emotions at how beautiful it is there. Ariel notices that the maid looks very happy to be at the night market. And the saint decides that she did the right thing in deciding to escape from the temple. Nearby, they sell glass candies, and Anna becomes interested in them. They really do look like pieces of glass, and you can even see a reflection in them. Ariel asks how much a bag of candy costs, and the seller quotes 1 franc. The saint immediately decides to buy 2 bags and takes them from the merchant. She then gives one of them to Anna as a gift. She really wanted to do something nice for the maid, and she asked to try the candy right away. And Anna is ready to burst into tears from how much the mistress cares about a simple servant. Ariel feels happy that she doesn't have to fear for her skin. However, Anna wonders if it was possible to buy these candies. After all, if the high priest finds out that they have slipped away, they will get into serious trouble. But Ariel is sure that Rayhouse is busy with guests, and moreover, she changed into Anna's clothes. Even though it looks simple, the saint still looks beautiful even in it. Suddenly, the girls notice that 2 men from the crowd have been watching them for a long time. Ariel decides to lure them to a place where there are no people, but Anna is frightened by this idea. After all, they may try to attack them, but the saint asks not to worry about this. She has something specially prepared for such situations that will help protect her. The Eliama Rose Festival offers a week-long opportunity to enjoy the roses in bloom. But to attract even more attention, a legend was created about the happiness of the newlyweds if they get married during this period. Because of this legend, many men approached the girls with marriage proposals. But 2 of them did not accept the refusal and decided to pursue them. Seeing that the girls turned into a dark alley, the men were incredibly happy. They decided that this was a way to agree to their proposal. But the boys don't even suspect that they've fallen into Ariel's trap. At this moment, Anna decides to stand up for the saint and protect her. The maid tries to convey that she is not an ordinary girl in front of the men, but they only smirk. There is no point in trying to pressure them with status, since the saint is dressed like a commoner. But there is only one way that will help you get rid of your pursuers. At this point, Ariel asks Anna not to interfere and wants to sort everything out herself. Meanwhile, the villains are just waiting for the girls to tremble with fear and agree to all their desires. But Ariel calmly approaches one of the guys and talks about the god of destruction. He once advised her to hit those who don't understand words. Ariel flicks the man on the head and he flies back. Meanwhile, his comrade is shocked by what happened to his friend. He starts shaking the man and tries to bring him to his senses, but to no avail. Anna admires how the saint threw away the villain like a kitten, and Ariel explains that all this is thanks to the blessing of the gods. But before Anna and he can rejoice, another guy attacks them. He holds a dagger in his hand, with which he is about to attack the saint. However, suddenly something happens and the knife falls to the ground. The villain immediately grabs his wounded arm and begins to scream in pain. At that moment, she hears someone's voice, who came to relax at the festival. Ariel sees Cass in front of her and realizes that it was he who protected her from the second villain. After this, the wounded man becomes indignant and asks who this is anyway. But before he can even finish speaking, he gets kicked in the head. The man falls on his back and everyone freezes at the sight. However, after this, he gets up and promises that he will not leave it like this. Cass looks closely at the villain and observes his actions. Meanwhile, the man rushes away headlong and promises revenge. But everyone is shocked that this impudent fellow just ran away out of fear. After this, the Lord switches to the saint and inquires about her condition. However, he did not expect that the girl would have such power to knock out the villain. But the girl tries to justify herself and says that he just got drunk. Ariel then expresses her admiration for Cass's skills as he stabbed the man with the dagger, and he mimics the girl and says that he just poked at random and accidentally hit the target. However, Cass does not understand why the saint walks without protection in the evenings. It's very unsafe, so he offers to accompany her. After this, they return to the festival again, but this time together. And Ariel feels a lot of discomfort and she wants to run away all the time. The girl doesn't understand why everything always goes differently than she planned. Even Anna decided to slip away and leave the couple, the saint and Cass, alone. This only plays into the Lord's hands, and he even praises the maid for her intelligence. Ariel then decides to remind Cass that he must have a lot of things to do. However, he has already finished everything and asks the girl not to worry about it. Suddenly, children run past them and touch the girl, almost knocking her off her feet. Ariel herself didn't notice how, out of fear, she found herself in the Lord's arms. After this, she becomes indignant that the children are running so fast. But the Lord explains to her that these guys are orphans and they have no one. To feed themselves, they have to steal food or pick someone else's pocket. And it is already clear what path these children have chosen for the future, although they are still young. Cass then decides to tell the saint about the dark side of society. Many poor people lose faith in the gods and do not understand why aristocrats live in clover. Meanwhile, they have to make ends meet without the ability to change everything. Moreover, the Lord adds that he himself does not believe in the power of the gods, and Ariel clenches her fist on her chest. She explains that she understands the feelings of the man and the poor people. And although the world is not perfect, the girl still believes that the gods are trying for the good of everyone. It's easiest to blame the gods for everything, and so she decides to do her part to improve the world. After all, Ariel is a saint, and of all people, she is closest to higher powers. Cass is very surprised by her decision and can't even hide it with his facial expression. After this, he takes the girl by the hand and repeats that he would very much like to get to know her better. And all this is because every time he sees the saint, his heart beats like crazy. At this moment, he puts the girl's hand to his chest and she hears the rhythm of his heart. But he has icy fingers and the same temper, so why does it beat so furiously? However, the girl decides not to think about such nonsense and refers to the late hour. And Cass compliments her because with such a girl he forgot about everything in the world. Ariel thinks that he has already poured similar sweet words into the ears of many girls. After this, she literally decides to run away from the man's questions and says goodbye to him. Then the girl begins to scold herself for behaving like a fool next to the Lord. Anna also abandoned her to her fate and left her with this handsome man. The next day marks the first stage of the Rose Blooming Festival. And this is the second time that the saint will appear before the people as a real one. For the occasion, she wore a red dress to match the festival. The girl prepares to go out to the people and the guards open the door for her. After this, she is illuminated by a bright light that hits her straight in the eyes. Ariel is very nervous because she is going out in front of a huge number of people. But the people greet the saint very warmly and rejoice at her appearance. Rayhouse is next to her, supporting the girl. However, perhaps Camilla should have been standing in her place now. But seeing the support of the gods, Ariel feels that she is in her place. At this point, Monty advises her to stand differently to look more attractive. But Ariel considers this useless advice and does not listen to it. Meanwhile, the girl recalls their conversation with Cass, where he expressed disbelief in the power of the gods. But the saint is confident that as long as people believe in them, they will definitely try to help them. And what kind of blessing it will be, and from which god depends on them. It's a shame that Ariel doesn't consider herself a real saint and can't help these people. After all, she could have used holy power and at least slightly eased the suffering of the people. At this time, all three of her admirers are nearby and observe the situation. After this, the saint goes to the temple garden to enjoy its beauty. Anna is worried about her mistress's condition and asks her to rest in her bedroom. But Ariel considers this to be excessive concern, especially since fresh air is already very beneficial. Taking advantage of the moment, the girl asks the maid to bring her tea. After this, she notices a great abundance of blooming white roses. The girl finds it so beautiful that she decides to take a closer look at them. She is even interested in why they decided to plant so many white roses in the garden. Suddenly, Rayhouse appears again, appearing out of nowhere as usual. The saint asks if he managed to finish his work, and the man answers in the affirmative. At this moment, he picks a white brass flower to give to Ariel. In his opinion, she goes well with the girl, and it would be great if she took her. Ariel thanks the high priest, but she is sad that the flower had to be picked. After all, his life was shortened, and Rayhouse was puzzled by her words. The more he gets to know the saint, the more he notices changes in her since the day of their meeting. She's like a different person, and it doesn't seem like the old Ariel was worried about the flower's life. Although Rayhouse did shorten his life, he still doesn't know how to give flowers any other way. And Ariel explains that there is no point in ruining the life of a rose, as it will quickly wither and lose its scent. However, the man did this in order to at least make her smile for a little while. Once upon a time, Ariel told him that with all her heart she longed to see white brass. After that, he planted a whole garden of these flowers in the backyard so that the girl could admire them. He even provided a way to prevent the plants from withering in winter. Ariel was shocked by his words and didn't even know that he planted an entire garden for her. This act really touches her heart, and the girl gratefully says thank you to the man. He said that while she was in the temple, he would order no one to pick the flowers. But if she decides to leave, then he will bring plucked white roses to her house every day. However, Ariel assures Rayhouse that she has no plans to leave the temple, and she herself understands that in this way the man is threatening her with death. After this, the high priest reports that a virgin possessing divine powers has appeared in the Empire. After some time, Ariel returns to her room and starts eating dinner. A juicy steak sits on her table as she cuts it into pieces. However, she can't swallow a drop after what she learned. The girl knew perfectly well that she was a false saint and planned to leave before Camilla arrived. But it was supposed to appear only in 5 years, and not right now. After this, the girl asks Anna to clear the table, although she hasn't even touched the food. She has no appetite, especially since now she has to remember everything about Camilla's appearance. If her memory serves her right, this happened after receiving a relic from Reed, the god of eternity. Then it's worth checking if this item is available in the magic item shop. Ariel opens the board and realizes that the very same relic is in place. If Camilla had truly awakened her power, this item would have disappeared from sale. Moreover, the girl's hometown is Ares, and the new maiden appeared in Tiago. It's on the opposite side of the continent, and obviously we're talking about a different girl. After this, Ariel decides to turn to the gods and asks them about a new saint. But when it's not necessary, they chatter non-stop, but now it's as if they've kept their mouths shut. Although what difference does it make if Ariel will still have to vacate the saint's place? However, she remains incomprehensible to Rayhouse's reaction, who asks her not to worry about it. The man explained that the appearance of the saint would not affect the girl in any way. Even if she is real, no one would dare to kick Ariel out of the temple. This is very strange, since the real heroine, according to him, should have left the temple after the appearance of the saint. All this gives Ariel terrible thoughts and wild fantasies. Is Rayhouse really going to lock her in a dungeon and torture her? At this point, all the gods decided to speak up and discuss her suspicions. And Ariel asks to stop bullying her and wants to sleep. Moreover, the gods must have been tired after sending blessings to people. Suddenly, the girl hears some kind of knocking and it scares her a lot. She looks at the window in her room and thinks she just imagined it. However, the door opens slightly and slowly begins to swing open. This causes even more horror in the girl, as something strange begins to happen. She realizes that she wasn't imagining things, and that some terrible entity had made its way to the 4th floor. Suddenly, a man appears in front of her, who is outraged that the window was not opened for him. It turned out to be Crown Prince Kyle, and he said that he had come to kidnap the saint. After this, he quickly directs his steps towards the girl. Meanwhile, she hopes that he is joking and asks again why the prince came. At this moment, he touches her face with his hand and says that she looks a bit pale. The prince then explains that last time he had already made an oath not to kill her. So Ariel has nothing to fear and he came just to kidnap her. This news stuns our heroine and makes her worry. And Kyle adds that the guards are no obstacle to him and he can kill them all. After this, he grabs Ariel in his arms and asks her to be quiet. But if not, he can always shut her up with a kiss. The saint doesn't know what to do and what this madman is saying. Meanwhile, he stands on the edge of the window and warns that he is going to jump. Ariel doesn't even have time to stop him before she suddenly finds herself in the air. After this, they land, having safely jumped from the 4th floor. The saint, in fear, pressed herself against the kidnapper with all her might and could not let him go. But after landing, she suddenly jumps away from him and apologizes. Then the girl looks at her body and sees that there is not a scratch on it. At this point, Kyle asks the saint to follow him and to do it as quickly as possible. But the girl stands still as she worries about the consequences of her kidnapping. Kyle replies that he will cut out the tongue of anyone who dares to present anything. In that case, Ariel is interested in where they are going, but the prince cannot say. And by the way, this is the first time he has kidnapped a person, so the saint needs to be understanding and obedient. The girl understands that she has no other choice and tries not to get on the prince's nerves. She has been following him for about 10 minutes, but there is nothing around except trees. She can no longer go back and hopes that Kyle is not leading her to certain death. And the man asks the girl to relax since they have already arrived. At this moment, the couple comes out into a clearing strewn with thousands of red roses. Ariel couldn't even imagine that there was such a place next to the temple. Kyle often comes here when his head gets too busy. After this, he begins to talk about the appearance of a real saint. Apparently, the gods decided that Ariel's body could not withstand their power and chose another person. In connection with this, the former saint must soon be expelled from the temple. And the crown prince decides to offer her another position in the imperial palace. After this, he extends his hand to Ariel and asks her to go with him. A few days ago, interesting events unfolded in the imperial palace. The duke's son, Shane Rockford, was furious that his highness was doing nothing. He heard that the empress was pregnant and he should think about his own successor. After all, if the empress gives birth to a son, then Kyle will not be in the best position. However, the prince doesn't care about this at all, and he's not worried about the appearance of his little brother. But Shane tries to convince the man that it's time for him to think about an heir. And at this time, he had already managed to reject Heminson's daughter and the saint. And suddenly, Rockford has an epiphany and decides that Kyle prefers men. He's probably been in love with Shane for a long time, and that's why he doesn't let women near him. However, even if Kyle had preferred boys, he would never have fallen in love with the duke's son. After this, the prince turns around and decides to end this conversation. Rockford has gotten on his nerves so much that it's unbearable to be in the same room with him. And a few months ago, the fake saint sent Kyle a letter. Its content was truly disgusting and unpleasant. Ariel wrote that she thinks about the prince every night and wishes for his love. This angered Kyle so much that he stabbed her letter with a dagger. Then he began to dream very strongly about how to cut her throat. Kyle had expected that the saint would start hitting on him at the banquet and he could kill her right there. However, this did not happen, as everything did not go according to the prince's plan. When he saw Ariel again after receiving the letter, there was something wrong with her. The girl behaved completely differently, as if she had become a completely different person. There was confidence in her eyes, and her manners were graceful and dignified. He even had the feeling that she was a real saint in front of him. He was especially impressed by the fact that she called out the name of the god Ciel and saved the situation at the banquet. Perhaps Ariel was deliberately acting like a complete fool to lull those around her into a false sense of security. And when the prince saw her eyes, they even seemed pretty to him. At this point, Kyle punches himself in the face to come to his senses. He thinks he's going crazy thinking about the fake saint. Meanwhile, a warrior approaches the prince with important information. He reports that an important letter has arrived from the temple for His Highness. And now he stands next to Ariel in a field of roses and offers her another position. The girl did not expect that the prince would be concerned about her fate after leaving the temple. But she already has a plan on how to act and live on after all this. And Kyle knows about the girl's past life and knows that she will not return to her home. And if things were different, she wouldn't have agreed to a deal with Ray House for the sake of a stable life. The prince is indeed right, as Ariel was bullied in her family and now has nowhere to go. But why is Kyle so insistent that she move into his palace? After all, it will attract a lot of attention and become his vulnerability. So Ariel asks for forgiveness, but decides to refuse his offer. Moreover, the Empress is probably already against the girl. At this point, Kyle explains that he wanted to convince her without going to extremes. After all, since the Empress is against the saint, then after her departure from the temple, she will be killed, and she can use Ariel as leverage to put pressure on Kyle. Therefore, the prince's proposal is beneficial to both of them, as it will save them. No one would dare to lay a finger on the man he brought to the palace. After such arguments, Ariel decides to think about it, since even in this case there is no guarantee of her safety. After all, the Empress could harm her in the absence of the Crown Prince. Kyle agrees to give the girl time to think, but asks her not to make a mistake. After all, her life depends on her decision, and he will come for the answer tomorrow. After this, the saint returns to the temple and understands that she will hardly be able to sleep today. Everything constantly goes wrong and life throws her nothing but problems. At this moment, the gods express their displeasure at the prince's sudden invasion. But Ciel began to stand up for him, and he and Monty started a fight. Ariel clutches her head at their behavior, but understands that on one hand, Kyle is right. Without a plan and means of defense, she could be killed almost on the steps of the temple. But at the same time, she has the blessing of Hesed and Ciel, thanks to which she is almost invulnerable. Plus, Ariel can buy some useful relics. The saint already knows what decision she will make, and there is only one problem left. Now we need to figure out how to get rid of the Crown Prince's sword. After all, after she refuses him, he will definitely be very angry. The next day, Ariel and Dwayne leave the trading guild again. The girl has already done everything she planned, and now she can return to the temple. However, it is not at all comfortable to walk down the street when you are accompanied by 3 men. The festival is almost over and the Saint of Tiago will arrive, so it's time to check all your savings. Ariel sees 2,000 francs in her account and is glad that she can now defend herself from Kyle's sword. It is very important for her to become invulnerable before leaving the temple, although she has already changed her plans several times. Suddenly there is a noise and Ariel freezes in place in fear. A horse rushes right past her at great speed and almost knocks her off her feet. The girl miraculously survived and understands that the person riding on the horse was not an ordinary person. It turns out to be the Empress's younger brother, Alberto Michael, and he rode on horseback right along the pedestrian area where a lot of people pass. At this point, Dwayne inquires with horror about the saint's condition and sees that she is fine. And nearby, voices of people can be heard who are outraged that the man didn't even slow down in front of the child. Everyone has already gotten used to Michael's antics, who is not afraid to behave in this way. But the worst thing is that that same boy turns out to be dead after being run over. People say that he is from the Thieves' Guild and is an orphan. This news shocks Ariel, and she tries to push her way through the crowd at breakneck speed. But people hardly pay attention to her, and the girl has to make a huge effort. Finally, the saint goes around the crowd of people and sees something that terrifies her. The girl stops near the boy's body and cannot come to her senses from the sight of him. At that moment, Dwayne appears nearby and she orders him to take the boy's body to the hotel. The man cannot understand why the saint needs this, and Ariel has to shout at him to make him do it. After this, Dwayne stops asking stupid questions and accepts the order. He turns to the crowd and demands that some kind of stretcher be brought immediately. Ariel meanwhile sees that the boy is still alive, although his breathing is intermittent and his pulse is weak. And yet she takes his bloody hand and tries to save him from death. Before her rebirth, our heroine was dying in terrible agony and now decided to help the boy. Seeing that he is on the brink of life and death, she does everything to prevent the tragedy. First of all, the girl demands that they be accommodated in a hotel. However, the owner explains that their reputation will suffer if the boy dies. He hesitates to give them the keys to the spare room, but Ariel confidently replies that he will survive. The girl then removes her hood and declares that she is Saint Elium. In her real life, the heroine was born an illegitimate child, hated by everyone. That's why their fates with Ariel are somewhat similar, and the girl was constantly despised. However, the real heroine has a completely different character, as she intended to take revenge on her offenders. This concerned everyone who bullied her and hurt her with their humiliations. The girl was able to take revenge, and these people were much worse off than she was. But even after that, she continued to poison their lives and could not stop. Only thanks to the rule of an eye for an eye was the heroine able to survive in that cruel world. But now she has been reborn, and everything here is completely different than in her past life. Here, the heroine gained the power that allows her to both take and give life. After saving that bird, the girl no longer practiced healing magic. Therefore, she is not confident in her abilities, but is ready to pray to all the gods just to save the boy. At this moment, divine power begins to swirl around the saint like a wind. She penetrates the boy's body and begins to gradually heal him. Ariel notices that all his wounds are slowly healing and stopping bleeding. But suddenly something happens that fills the girl with incredible horror. She feels a sharp pain in her stomach and grabs the place. Apparently, when she heals, she takes on other people's pain, and saving people turns out to be not so easy. However, now for the girl, someone else's life is much more important than her own feelings. And this pain will not stop her from finishing what she has already started. Suddenly, the boy takes a deep breath and jumps up from his seat. He immediately examines himself and does not understand how he was able to survive the collision with the horse. At that moment, he hears someone's pleasant female voice and turns around. Ariel approaches the boy and says that she is happy for his recovery. At this time, he is sitting on the bed and wondering who saved him from death. And the saint explains that thanks to the help of the gods, he remained alive and his wounds healed. The boy is very grateful, but he is upset that he has nothing to repay with. However, Ariel rushes to calm him down and says that she doesn't need anything. She then finds out that the boy is about to turn 10 years old and is from the Thieves' Guild. The saint warns him that next time he must be careful and run away from the horses. In addition to this, she gives the boy money so that he can buy himself new clothes. With this coin, he will be able not only to buy clothes, but also to buy food. Afterwards, she puts it in the boy's hand and asks him to simply say thank you. However, the boy replies that he cannot take this money from the lady. But Ariel explains that now he will help her, and this is her payment. In the original novel, one place on the continent was mentioned several times. Confidential information is exchanged there around the clock. And this place is called the Thieves' Guild, access to which Ariel needs. After all, she will have to leave the temple soon anyway, and it would be nice to find out about everything through this guild. This way, the saint will be able to protect herself from most threats, including the imperial family. And most likely, with this child's help, she can gain access to the information she needs. But this cooperation will be beneficial not only to Ariel, but also to this boy. And the boy at this time cannot understand what kind of help he can provide to the saint. And Ariel explains that from time to time she will need information from the Thieves' Guild. Since she saved the child, he can not worry and trust the girl. The boy agrees to these conditions, but he is interested in what kind of information she wants. But Ariel wonders if she can trust the boy and decides to find out. The saint asks him to find out about one necklace and believes that this will be a good test. This is a very famous garnet necklace, which was the last gift of the former empress. The boy must find out where it is now, and Ariel will be waiting for him in 3 days. Since the guy is from the Thieves' Guild, he will be able to enter the Ilium Chapel without any problems. She asks to go out through the window, since they are on the first floor and it is safe. The main thing is to go around the door, since the Knights of the Temple are standing there, and the deal must be carried out secretly. The boy understood the saint's words perfectly, and finally thanks her for saving him. At this time, Dwayne stands at the door to the room and tries to eavesdrop on the conversation. Suddenly, Ariel opens the door and comes face to face with the man. Dwayne immediately begins to justify himself and says that he did not want to scare the saint. But he is very interested in what actually happened to that half-dead child. A man sees a bloody bed and doesn't understand what happened. And Ariel claims that his body came to life and escaped through the hotel window. In this situation, it is useless to ask Dwayne to keep his mouth shut. After all, he will tell Ray House everything anyway, and therefore there is no point in trusting him. After this, Ariel puts her hood back on and announces her desire to return to the temple. And she leaves Dwayne in the room to clean up all the mess. But after the saint returned, a wild cry began to rise in the temple. The thing is that Ariel discovered a crescent-shaped scar on her stomach. Yesterday he wasn't there, but today he appeared after using force. The girl felt pain in her stomach and therefore decided to examine the area. But Ariel is not a warrior in a sailor suit, and maybe this scar just confused the titles. However, the girl is absolutely sure that this mark is somehow connected to her power. At this moment, she receives notifications that inform her of the saint's increased power. This included the stigma that emerged after the girl's actions. This is a sign of holy power, which is manifested only in saints, as proof. But Ariel doesn't understand what this has to do with her, because she's a fake. At this time, to the girl's surprise, the new god Oman tries to enter the oracle. However, it seems that the gods are not very happy with the newcomer among them. And judging by their reaction to his appearance, Oman could even be called an outcast. So Ariel suggests that they get along with Oman and stop bullying him. The new guy is very touched by the girl's words, and she also has a good impression of him. But the other gods feel threatened by him and do not want to be friends with him. After this, they pretend to fall asleep and ignore the saint's request. Meanwhile, Omen winks at the girl and tells her that there is nothing to worry about. Ariel decides not to interfere in their relationship, especially since she is now more concerned about the stigma. The heroine of the novel was definitely a false saint, but why did she have a mark? This makes the girl think about her role, as she now has many questions. At this time, Ray House worships the god of arts and asks him to guide him on the righteous path. He reads a prayer and wants the wicked thoughts to leave his head. Then the high priest opens his eyes and realizes that someone has come to him. This man turns out to be Dwayne, who has something to say to the master. Today he saw something very strange that was connected with the saint. A child was trampled by a horse in the square, but the girl ordered him to be taken to the hotel. Then she locked herself in a room with him, as if she wanted to pray for his soul. But when Dwayne walked inside, he couldn't believe his eyes. There was no trace left of the boy's body, as if he had disappeared somewhere. After this, Ray House asks if the boy was really dying. And Dwayne explains that his back was broken, as were his limbs. Together with the knights, he waited for the saint outside the door, and the boy could only go out the window. And when they went inside, the saint said that the child had simply run away. After these words, Ray House assumes that he is indeed healed. But Dwayne, who saw everything with his own eyes, is sure that this is impossible. The first saint, who was considered the most powerful of all, also healed people. However, it took her more than an hour to bring the dying man back to life. How then could this saint cope so quickly? After this, Rayhouse asks where Ariel is now. He decides to see her immediately and find out all the details. Meanwhile, the girl stands in her room and enters the magic shop. She sees that there are still locked items left after leveling up. But at the same time, more and more new things and skills are already appearing in the store. But many of them cost as much as a helicopter, and Ariel can only dream of such purchases. Suddenly, an object catches her eye that seems very attractive. This is a Hesed bracelet that helps with self-defense and doesn't cost much. At the festival, 2 guys picked on her, but Cass helped her deal with them. However, one cannot rely on chance, especially since after leaving the temple, a hunt will be declared for her. So Ariel decides to buy this bracelet, and she has 1,500 francs left. Although she hadn't planned on spending the money so soon, the purchase seemed sensible. After this, a notification appears that the price of Oman's whip has been reduced, but Ariel still won't buy it. And once again, Rayhouse appears in her room, arriving unannounced. Ariel didn't expect to see him, but she greeted the high priest. She then explains that she was looking out the window and enjoying the view so as not to give herself away. Otherwise, upon learning the truth, Rayhouse will simply decide that the girl has gone crazy. And he draws the saint's attention to the fact that it is better to admire the landscape from the outside. After all, even its beauty is better enjoyed from close up rather than peeking from around the corner. And again, Ariel herself did not understand how she agreed with the man's compliment. And at that moment, he decides not to miss the chance and suggests taking a walk in the garden. After this, they leave the temple together and find themselves next to a scattering of white roses. It's incredibly beautiful here during the day, but at night the flowers glow like lanterns, and Rayhouse decides to tell the legend that relates to these roses. Ariel didn't even know that such a thing existed, and that we were talking about the fairy Lotunia. One day, she met a young man who fell head over heels in love with her. But unfortunately, his feelings were not mutual, as the fairy loved someone else. Then the young man turned to the demon for help so that the fairy would become his forever. And the demon replied that he needed to kill the bird and wrap it in vines and then throw it by the road. The young man did just that, and the next day, Lotunia was lying there instead of the bird. Her wings were broken and she could not fly, so she began to live with a young man. However, she stopped smiling, and then the young man turned to the demon again. He wanted to bring the girl back to joy, and the demon told him to wrap her broken wings in vines. The next day, the young man whom the fairy loved became entangled in thorns and died. After this, Lotunia smiled at the young man for the first and last time. It was so bright that the smile blinded the young man's eyes. And that was the last thing she did before she died. After a bright smile, Lotunia kissed her lover's poison-soaked lips and died after him. However, Ariel does not understand why the fairy smiled after the death of her beloved. And Rayhouse explains that the young man dreamed so much of seeing her joy that he yearned for a smile his entire life. He struggled to cope with the pain of loss, but his suffering grew stronger with each passing day. Longing was the worst punishment for him, and even death was not as terrible as the loss of his beloved. After this, the young man took the rose that grew on the site of Lotunia's death and pricked himself on the thorns. They were saturated with the bitterness of the fairy, and the poison entered his blood, killing him painfully. Ariel becomes sad about this story because it seems like an obsession. Rayhouse agrees with her, since the desire to possess something that does not belong to a person is truly an obsession. But it is possible that the young man simply did not know how to show his love in any other way. After this, he touches the saint's hair and asks how she would react if he did the same. Ariel would have hated him for deciding to break the wings of his beloved. At this moment, the girl is shocked by such closeness and thinks that the man ate something bad. Even the gods are wary, and Oman again offers to buy her his whip. It feels like he's enjoying it, but she still won't buy it. Rayhouse is still waiting for the girl to answer, but she seems to forget what they were talking about. After this, the man suggests forgetting about it and switches to another topic. He expresses his belief that Ariel may be a true saint. This shocks the girl, and she tries to understand where he got this idea from. She then reminds the high priest that he personally tested her powers before making her a saint. And he replies that Ariel told him something when she asked him to plant the white lotunia. The girl promised that she would admire these flowers every day. It is believed that these flowers can make wishes come true, and Ariel wanted to make one wish. Because of a sad legend, these roses are also called blessed. All this is because this flower has one hidden feature, and Ariel said that she saw that the flowers looked like lanterns. And at night, the light of the lotunia can only be seen by those who have divine power. Now Rayhouse asks if the girl wants to tell him something, and she specifically read a bunch of books to avoid such problems, and all in vain. But nothing can be turned back, and as always, we will have to improvise. So Ariel explains that she recently had a dream in which the lotunia was glowing blue and swaying in the wind. And it seemed to her as if the flowers were sparkling in the moonlight, just like in her dream. But Rayhouse is in no hurry to believe the girl and asks if she is lying. To this, Ariel explains that she has no need to lie because she always wanted to become a real saint. But if the man still cannot get rid of his doubts, then she will have to take extreme measures. Therefore, the girl suggests testing her abilities again using the sphere. In this case, Rayhouse will be able to verify the veracity of her words. And with a confident and serious face, Ariel waits for the high priest's answer. And he says that it seems to him that the girl has changed a lot lately. He hopes that it really was just his imagination, because this is the first time something like this has happened to him. Previously, the man had not encountered the problem of difficulty controlling himself. At this moment, his hand tightly squeezes his own neck to prevent his feelings from getting out. And after that, he tells Ariel that he is waiting for her tomorrow in the temple annex. There, he will be able to check whether the girl told him the truth today. And now she doesn't know how to get out of the situation in such a short time. After some time, the saint returns to the room and finds the window wide open. There is a note on her desk and she picks it up to read it. Could this really be a letter from someone she really didn't want to see today? This message was left by Prince Kyle, who promises to return tomorrow. Ariel realizes that her intuition had not failed her, and she had been right. She is so tired of this emotional swing that she wants to run away right now. However, before this, the girl decides to see how things are going with the gods. And they are all interested in what decision she will make regarding Rayhouse. At this point, Ariel asks one of them to break the sacred power sphere in the temple. She knows it's wrong to do this, but she has no other choice. After all, tomorrow Rayhouse will test her for divine power, and it is very important that he does not find out anything. Ariel practically begs the gods and asks to just temporarily disable the sphere. Then she receives a notification that the gods are currently unavailable and are in a meeting. Meanwhile, the saint continues to simply stand and wait for the verdict. For the first time, she sees the gods ignoring her and discussing something for a long time. But a whole hour had passed, and Ariel still hadn't received an answer. She even thinks that she has crossed the line with this request. Therefore, the girl decides to go to bed and not to torment herself with anticipation. And if the gods don't help her, she will most likely rot in prison. Until the very morning, Ariel dreams of a dream in which she asks the gods to help her live in peace. But at that moment, Anna bursts into her room, trying to wake up her mistress. The saint barely opens her eyes, and the girl tells her about the incident in the temple extension. It turns out that it collapsed overnight, and this caused a great fright in everyone. But Ariel can't believe that the gods actually heard her request. Inside the temple, there are 5 large zones and the main building. It is usually where sacred ceremonies are held and believers gather. There is also an area with rooms where the priests and priestesses are located, and a library where Ariel received knowledge from the very beginning. But the most important place is where the sacred relics are kept. However, now this special building has been completely destroyed in one night, and Ariel can't understand what's really going on here. The maid Anna explains that the temple seems to have been turned upside down. Luckily, no one was hurt, and that's the only good news this morning. The high priest even held a meeting with the senior priests. At this moment, Ariel realizes that everything happened because of her request. But the gods overdid it so much that instead of just one sphere, they destroyed the entire extension. The girl had no idea that everything would turn out to have such consequences. Moreover, what gods would agree to destroy their own temple? Meanwhile, they don't even worry about the building, which they didn't particularly like. Suddenly, Ray House is distracted from the meeting and calls the girl to him. He reports that they have already finished discussing the destroyed building, and all the priests agreed that this did not look like a natural phenomenon. There wasn't a cloud in the sky, but lightning came out of nowhere and struck the temple. It was followed by a powerful earthquake, and meteorite fragments began to fall. After this, the water main burst into pieces and everything around was flooded with water. And in horror from what she heard, Ariel realizes that the gods were holding a meeting only to distribute roles. Meanwhile, Ray House thinks that all this is the work of one of the higher magicians. But the girl completely forgot that there are also magicians in this world. And judging by the nature and force of destruction, the class of this villain is not lower than 9th. However, Ray House understands that there are no mages of this level in the Empire. Since he has many questions, he decides to entrust this matter to Baron Bester. He will have to find out who dared to do such a thing. At this time, Ariel remembers the name of the Baron, who is the greatest magician in the Empire. Diego Bester earned the title of Baron for his abilities, although he himself is considered a dark horse. And all this is because he is one of the dukes who controls the demon world. In the novel, Ariel becomes envy-struck and makes a contract with Diego for her soul. After this, the Baron inflicts terrible harm on Camilla, but the holy power protects her. In other words, Ariel must not meet Diego in any way, so that everything does not happen as in the novel. Therefore, she informs the High Priest that she does not agree with his decision. What worries her most is the temple's prestige, and the mages will laugh at them for doing such a thing. However, Ray House is confident that it is necessary to discern traces of magic, and this is the only way to find the criminal. After using such power, traces of it remain on a subtle level. But Ariel knows that after the god's tricks there can be no magical traces. Therefore, she asks the man to guess what would happen if this information were made public. If all the residents find out about the magicians, the temple's reputation will suffer greatly. People will think that the security here is so bad that anyone can destroy the entire building on their own. And Ariel makes it clear in every way that she is concerned about the townspeople's faith. After these words, Ray House thinks and says that the girl has changed a lot. And she just jokes that magicians are complete strangers to her. Ray House agrees with the saint's arguments and suggests investigating the matter with the help of knights. Ariel thanks him for this and hurries back to her room. In the morning, she managed to see many shocking things, and the High Priest lets her rest. But at this time, he continues to keep his eyes on the girl he is watching. And after some time, the saint decides to check her balance before escaping. The circumstances are already so complicated that she wants to do it as quickly as possible. Everything doesn't go as she planned, and at that moment, Anna enters the room. She brings the lady a message from the palace and hands it over to her. In it, Kyle announces that he will not be able to come to the temple for some time. This news made the girl happy, and Anna managed to find out what the saint had asked her about. It turns out that for some reason, a carriage left for Tiago 10 days ago. And if you take into account the time spent there, then everything will take 2 weeks. However, first the special building collapsed, and now people from the palace began to scurry back and forth. Ariel understands that only those from high society can know about the new saint. And if it was 10 days ago, then Ray House had already planned everything then. After all, he decided to bring a new saint to the temple even before he told about it. And once it arrives, a simple measurement of the force will make everything clear. But what is unclear is why the High Priest wants to test her strength. After this, Ariel goes to one of the temple's zones to find answers to her questions. She approaches the 3rd column in the eastern part of the ceremonial hall. Since everything has already happened in Tiago, she can no longer stand still. The girl decides to do what she can and remembers Anna's words. She really wanted the saint to take her with her, despite all her efforts to become a junior priestess. Ever since Anna came to the temple, she lived in constant doubt and torment. But it was the saint who extended a helping hand to her, and now the girl is ready to follow her to the ends of the earth. Remembering these words, Ariel understands that she doesn't even have the right to feel despair. Besides, if Anna follows her, she will be able to help with the work. Only after the destruction of the special building, security at the temple was strengthened. Suddenly, the guy the saint was worried about appears next to the column. After all, getting through so many guards was not easy at all, but he succeeded. This boy turns out to be the same child who was hit by the horse. He found out about the garnet necklace that was in the hands of Count Rosento. It was the current count's father, Hagen, who bought this treasure several years ago. But then the necklace was stolen and sold at auction to some woman. Ariel is pleased with the information she received and believes that the boy can now be trusted. So she asks him to find out one more important piece of information. But before that, the girl gives the guy a bag of money as payment for the next task. There are as many as 50 francs there, since he will have to spend money to get the information. This time, Ariel asks him to find out about a girl from Aries. And already by evening, the saint calmly returns to her room. However, even here she has no peace, as Ray House has decided to visit her again. But the girl does not show her true emotions and greets the man. At this point, Ray House replies that he came to ask the saint's opinion. In about 2 weeks, a carriage with a girl from Tiago will arrive at the temple. And from the palace, they ordered that the saint be sent to them as quickly as possible. The Empress has become pregnant and is eager to receive a blessing. After this news, Ariel realizes that things are not so rosy for Kyle. Apparently, he had these very circumstances in mind in his letter. And it was obvious that Ray House had come to ask whether Ariel would go to the palace or whether a new saint should be sent there. Although she doesn't really want to, the girl still decides to accept this as her last mission. So she's willing to do it if Ray House asks for it. However, the high priest himself does not want Ariel to go there, but if the saint does not appear at the palace, it will look strange. Moreover, he knows about the crown prince's several visits to Ariel. After these words, Ray House approaches the girl and becomes strange. Suddenly, he cannot contain his feelings and lays his head on her shoulder. The man looks quite depressed and wonders if Ariel still likes Kyle. And at that moment, she doesn't understand why the conversation suddenly went in this direction. Then the girl is distracted by a strange smell coming from the man. He smells of alcohol and admits that this is the only solace he has found. After all, everything doesn't go as planned for him, but if only he knew what Ariel is like now. At this point, Monty announces that he is giving up Ray House's body to the girl, and this infuriates her. And the man admits that he did his best to prepare a cozy place in the dungeon for her. But the earthquake destroyed everything, and now he has nowhere to hide Ariel. However, in the saint's mind, this looks like harsh confinement. Ray House thought that this would protect Ariel from the crown prince, but now he is the one who is treacherous to her. After this, the girl decides to calm the high priest and advises him to rest. She assures him that she can protect herself, and Ray House trusts her words. However, his eyes and smile make Ariel think. Then the man leaves, and the saint cannot hide her embarrassment from the amorous expression on his face. Meanwhile, the Empress awaits the arrival of the saint and even lies about the threat of miscarriage. Now she has to stay for a week and is dying of boredom. At this point, her brother informs her that this boredom will not last long. Alberto Michael is confident that if we wait a little, something fun will appear again. And Rose is surprised that her dissolute brother was able to play such an important role. The high priest and the saint probably thought that with the death of the maid, their secret would disappear. But how were they to know that this girl was crazy about Alberto? And if the power of the saint had disappeared with the appearance of another, the Empress could not have done anything. But everything changes when Ariel is actually a fake. So if something goes wrong, the Empress will have an ace up her sleeve. After all responsibility for the miscarriage will fall on the saint and Kyle. Suddenly, Rose knocks over the basin in which her feet had just been washed. The maid is overcome with horror and asks not to kill her, as she will not tell anything about what she heard. And the Empress, with a stern smile, cites fatigue and asks Alberto to sort it out. After some time, the day comes when Ariel arrives at the Imperial Palace. She steps out of her carriage and stands still for a moment. The palace seems so beautiful to her that it captivates her with its appearance. Even the temple, with its enormous influence, cannot compare to this place in terms of luxury. However, Ariel decides to focus on the main thing, since now is not the time to admire the views, and she begins by counting the money she has managed to accumulate over time. She has 3,500 francs in her account, and after some time the relics of the destroyed building should be found. And before Ray House calls the girl, she should buy that very sacred thing. If we think positively, then Ariel just needs to pass the holy power test. Once everything goes smoothly, she will be able to say goodbye to those who stand in her way. Therefore, the most important thing now is to quickly bless the Empress and return back. After some time, the Emperor meets the girl and tells her that a new saint has already been found. He finds it hard to believe, as this rarely happens in one generation, and the Empress begins to smile slyly and corrects her husband. After all, in her opinion, 2 saints in one generation is not at all uncommon. This was completely impossible, and so she had to order the carriage from Tiago to be intercepted. Rose explains that she urgently needs a blessing, and the temple must forgive this. At this moment, Ariel doesn't understand why everything went wrong again. After Kyle's words, she of course guessed about everything, but it happened too unexpectedly. And the Empress reports that she gathered 2 saints in one place to bless the baby. But on the other hand, she also intends to find out what shamelessness is happening now. The woman then falls onto the bed and says she has a headache. The Emperor is worried about his wife and promises her to sort everything out himself. What came as a surprise to Ariel was that Rose had planned it all herself. And things aren't going well, as Kyle is noticeably in a bad mood. But now it is much more important to find out not how things are between the prince and his stepmother. It is more important to pay attention to the new saint and understand what kind of girl from Tiago she is. At this moment, Alberto appears in the room and says that his sister is not feeling well. He is therefore generously willing to speak on her behalf today. At this moment, Ariel realizes that she has met the Empress's brother, who hit the boy. It turns out that these 2 make up a real family of villains. Suddenly, Alberto points his finger at Ariel and claims that she is deceiving everyone. But the Emperor decides to stand up for the saint and does not allow her to behave so unceremoniously. However, Rose confirms his words and says that she herself was shocked by the truth. Then the Empress turns to the saint and pronounces a name familiar to her. It's about her former maid, Annie, who recently died. She looked after the saint until last month and was acquainted with Alberto. Then Annie wanted to confess all her sins to him and was worried about the Empire. She thought her secret would cause a stir, but a real saint appeared in Tiago just in time. But Ariel could not even imagine that the Empress's brother was in cahoots with her servant. But Alberto doesn't stop there and takes out more evidence from his jacket. Before her death, Annie gave him a letter containing her confession and a sum from the saint for his silence. And she disappeared right after she sent this letter to Alberto. At the same time, the Empress's brother states that the saint wrote a letter with a proposal to the prince. Ariel is in shock at this time, as she now understands that all of this is Annie's doing, and the Emperor asks his son what this strange letter with the proposal is. But the Crown Prince explains that he doesn't even know anything about it. However, Alberto doesn't stop there and accuses Kyle of having an affair with the fake saint. At this time, the prince tries to restrain himself as much as possible and not hit this scoundrel. And Rose turns on the acting as if she didn't know about it. The woman pretends not to believe it, and the new saint asks her to calm down. After this, Kyle decides to put an end to this circus and turns to the Empress's brother. At the same time, he keeps his hand on his sword and says that Alberto is accusing him without reason. In such a case, is a man ready to answer for his words and pay with his life? Alberto is horrified by this statement, as he knows the prince's character. So he decides to seek protection from the Emperor and says that Kyle is threatening him. And the man decides to find out what the saint thinks about all this. The Emperor turns to Ariel and expects some explanation from her. But Alberto intervenes in the conversation and says that her words no longer make any sense. Kyle decides to intervene again, but at that moment the saint interrupts him. And now not only her life, but also the life of the prince will depend on her words. So Ariel asks if Alberto really called her a fake based on some maid's fabrications. And what evidence is there that the new girl is a real saint? it is unlikely that the imperial palace could have carried out the procedure of confirming sacred power in such a short time. To this, the Empress's brother replies that Lady Tina healed a deer with a broken leg. Along with this, she also gave sight to a blind man. All this was seen by many residents of Tiago, and therefore there is no doubt that the girl is a true saint. And Ariel, citing the weakness of her body, spent the entire time sitting in the temple. At this moment, the saint looks at Tina and ponders what she heard with surprise. After this, the girl turns to the emperor and asks him to call the palace doctors. They are the ones who will help determine who the false saint is here. But Alberto tries to dissuade the emperor, citing the fact that Ariel could have prepared in advance. However, the man is confident that the palace is not so weak that a person from outside could deceive them. Moreover, the saint has not yet suggested any method, and the knight is already resisting. Seeing the emperor's stern attitude, Ariel now understands who the prince takes after in his character. Just at that moment, Kyle comes up to her and asks what the girl is up to. It seems like he is also very worried about this situation. So Ariel asks him to watch and not worry about anything. After all, she is sure that now the situation will completely turn around. After some time, the doctors come and Ariel asks them to curtain the windows. At this moment, Alberto becomes very tense as he does not understand what the saint has planned. And the saint takes Tina's hands and places a white lotunia flower in them. The doctors notice this plant and are very shocked by what they see. And Ariel explains that she is going to identify the real saint with the help of this flower. It's all because her eyes can see the silver light emanating from him. But Alberto thinks it's nonsense that some rose can glow. Then the saint explains that the light of the white lotunia is visible only to those who have sacred power. And Tina, who came from Tiago, should also see this light if she is a true saint. The girl is very nervous but agrees with Ariel. However, our heroine knows that Camilla is from Aries and has golden hair. But in the case of this saint, none of this matches up and there can only be one explanation. This girl is just as fake as Ariel herself. At this point, the saint asks the healers to make an extract from white lotunia for tea. She also asks to bring an extract from the white death flower. This request causes shock among everyone present, including the doctors. After all, this flower is somewhat similar to lotunia, and it is difficult for an untrained eye to distinguish them. It got its name from the lethal dose of poison that can kill a person in a second. However, a true saint will have no problem identifying what kind of tea is brewed from lotunia. But this is not the only way Ariel intends to test the sacred power. After all, a false saint must have the courage to die if she is wrong. And only in this case the result can be considered accurate. If it becomes known that Ariel is a fake, the positions of the crown prince and the high priest will be shaken. And if the empress brings a false saint, then no one will be allowed to suspect her. This is probably exactly what Rosa's trying to achieve with this circus. Ariel is certain that Tina can see the light of lotunia, but only with the help of divine power. And the procedure for confirming sacred power is not very difficult and can be easily faked. This could easily have been used to beat the real Ariel, but not our heroine. At this moment, the girl turns to the Empress and asks her opinion. After all, Ariel, just like her, wants to expose the false saint. However, if this somehow harms her pregnancy, then nothing can be done. And the Empress has to agree to this experiment. And he does this allegedly in order not to worsen his health with the state's problems. After this, her husband gives orders for the doctors to prepare a cup of tea from each flower. They will then have to leave the room so that there is no opportunity to give a hint. And the arrangement of the cups will be chosen by the knight Michael, and no one but him will know about it. The saints must also cover their noses with rags and determine by sight which cup contains lotunia tea. When everything was ready, Ariel invited her rival to make the choice first. At this moment, the girl begins to worry a lot because something is going wrong. She looks at the cups and can't tell which one is which, although just recently Tina definitely saw the light emanating from the white lotunia. But for some reason now the light from both cups has disappeared and she can't see anything. The Emperor notices that the girl is hesitating and asks why she is taking so long to make her choice. At this point, Tina declares that this is a deception and that there is no lotunia in any of the cups. After all, neither of them emits light, which means it's definitely some kind of conspiracy. However, Ariel reports that she sees this blinding light with her own eyes. She drinks the tea where Lotunia was and states that someone was trying to deceive them all. Tina mistook the divine power for sacred and therefore did not distinguish the cups. However, Lotunia should not be brewed into tea as it becomes too bitter. Ariel wonders how many people know that if you separate a flower from its roots, it stops emitting light. But fortunately, she has helpers in the form of gods who helped her make a choice. After everything that happened, Tina starts screaming that this is impossible. She doesn't see any light, and this is not what she agreed on with Alberto. He promised to give her the wealth and honor of the entire empire of Ilium. However, Alberto decides to shut her up and pours poisoned tea into the girl's drink. The man accuses Tina of daring to deceive everyone, but Kyle comes between them. The Crown Prince forcefully pushes the Empress's brother away to save the false saint. The poisoned tea had not yet entered her system, and the girl escaped with only a severe fright. After all this, the Emperor clutches his head and tries to come to his senses. He is furious at this mess and orders the false saint to be taken away. The guards arrest the girl, and all charges against Ariel are dropped. At this point, Alberto decides to apologize to the Emperor in order to save his own skin. But the man says the Empress's brother should have thought twice about it first. After all, he staged a farce and decided to blame the temple for his actions. Therefore, the Emperor demands that Alberto kneel and beg the saint for forgiveness. And the man has no choice but to carry out the order. The Empress's brother asks for forgiveness, but Ariel feels disgust towards him. After all, he treats people as if their life were a simple toy for him. So the girl decides to teach the man a lesson and gives him a flick under the eye. However, thanks to the blessing of the gods, her blow turns out to be very powerful. Alberto clutches the bruised area, and the saint explains that this is a sign. She just received it from the God of Mercy, who is displeased with his behavior, and in the future he would like Alberto to be more attentive. After all this, the Emperor announces that there is no excuse for today's incident. But the saint also apologizes for arousing suspicion with her poor health. And the Emperor smiles and says that this is natural for the guide of citizens into the eternity of Ilium. He then grabs his son by the shoulder and adds that this is not the best place to talk. However, since the saint is so close to the prince that she exchanges letters, he invites her to the palace. And he hopes that in the future, Ariel will also maintain this closeness. And at that moment, the saint only thinks about how Kyle will finish her off at this rate. But he decides to save the situation and asks to take Ariel away so she can rest. At this time, the Emperor wants to give her a gift for the fact that the girl arrived at the palace so quickly. If you see his wife's face at that moment, it becomes clear that she is angry about her loss. After some time, Ariel gets into her carriage and heads back to the temple. But Kyle decided to keep her company and see her to her final destination. And the prince decides to take advantage of the moment to hear an explanation from Ariel. However, she asks not to ask her about what happened, as her plan will remain a secret. And Kyle now has doubts and does not understand how Ariel was able to deceive Rayhouse. After all, the prince no longer knows whether the girl is really a false saint. But our heroine explains that this is no longer important, since from the very beginning she has been of benefit to them and the high priest. And she won't bite her owners, so they don't have to worry. Kyle is still hesitant to believe it, and Ariel reminds him that he already has a specific enemy. Therefore, it would not be too wise to spoil your relationship with her. After this, she's about to get out of the carriage, but Kyle blocks her exit with his hand. Then he reminds her of his offer to move into his palace. It is no longer relevant now, but the prince still plans to visit the saint frequently. Now they have a common enemy, and the lives of everyone in the same boat with him belong to him. And without the knowledge of the crown prince, no one will dare to harm the girl. And Ariel boldly pushes his hand away and says that she is able to take care of herself. But Kyle explains that it's too late to draw a line between them, and the girl will no longer be able to get rid of his interference. Besides, Ariel's behavior only provokes him. Therefore, after some time, he promises to visit the temple. After this conversation, Ariel finally finds herself at home. The saint doesn't want Kyle to keep coming to her. All she wants is to get the treasure from the Emperor. and she would very much like the crown prince to remain in the palace. At that moment, she hears someone's voice asking for the Empress's blessing. Rayhouse is surprised that a fairly simple task took so long, and Ariel explains that she has encountered some difficulties. But the high priest already knows that the girl managed to expose the false saint. He also heard that Ariel had proven that she was the real one. Now he wonders how she managed to convince everyone of this. At this moment, the girl experiences great anxiety as she needs to make Rayhouse believe her. And she begins the story by saying that Tina really was a fake. However, she is also like that and was able to deceive everyone with her trick. And the high priest replies that the girl always cleverly avoids the topic. But it looks as if one of the gods helps her in every situation. So this time, Ariel has to explain everything properly. At this point, he picks up the sphere and activates it to test it. The entire room is filled with bright light, which begins to emanate from the ball. Ariel can't believe that this is the same sphere in front of her. And Rayhouse reminds that they wanted to do something with the girl last time. After this, he puts on gloves and looks closely at the saint. The high priest notices her agitation, as if she had not prepared any trick this time. At this point, the girl decides to calm down and come up with a plan. If a man wants to test her, she will not resist. After all, there is nothing difficult in finding out everything with the help of a sphere. After this, the girl approaches the ball and places her hand on it. However, nothing happens and the sphere does not react in any way. Rayhouse then reveals that Ariel does indeed have no sacred power. But he doesn't know that a sacred relic, a sealing pendant, helped her with this. She received it from the Emperor, and this thing is made of precious stones. If you wear it, all the sacred power and mana in your body will be sealed. Ariel originally wanted to use this pendant against the Demon King, but now it came in handy in this situation too, so now we can calmly go back. However, Rayhouse stops the girl and says that she probably saw the prince in the palace. Ariel replies that this is indeed the case, and the man tries to contain his anger. Now Rayhouse assumes that one day she will decide to go to him again. At this point, the girl falls silent for a moment and thinks about what to say. She then turns to the high priest and says that she is grateful to him for his warmth. However, he shows too much unhealthy interest in the saint. To this, Rayhouse replies that he previously considered this impossible. But since Ariel is a false saint, nothing bad will happen if she goes outside the temple. However, at some point everything changed, and the man can't do anything about it. He felt upset when Ariel began to go outside the temple. Now the high priest decides to tell the girl about his feelings. His heart should only beat like that when he is praying to God, but for some reason, every time he looks at the saint, it begins to rage. That is why he really wanted the girl to be one of the two. It had to be either a goddess or a real saint. But it is certainly impossible for a girl to stop being a fake in one moment. However, if this were to happen, Rayhouse might be more honest in his feelings. And at that moment, Ariel mentally begs him not to be so honest. If she were to pick one of her favorite scenes in the novel, it would be the one about Rayhouse. In it, the high priest kisses the foot of a tired and sleeping Camilla. For him, she was a goddess to whom he could not express his feelings in any other way. But at this rate, the whole plot will change, and Ariel doesn't want that. Therefore, she assures Rayhouse that with the appearance of a real saint, he will love her even more. In this case, the man will forget about Ariel, as it is similar to the balloon effect. However, the high priest reports that after such words, her chest hurts. Ariel herself feels uneasy at how sad Rayhouse's face is at this moment. But she decides to collect her thoughts and not react to it like that. Therefore, the girl replies that if the man has nothing more to say, then she will go. Besides, Rayhouse knows perfectly well that she is a fake and will one day leave the temple. He should not show excessive affection towards her. The gods at this time condemn Ariel's coldness, but she tries not to take it to heart. Moreover, she already had a headache from worry. Suddenly, the girl begins to hear screams asking for help. Ariel immediately jumps up and runs towards the commotion, but what she sees, the girl could not have imagined even in her worst nightmare. Her maid Anna lies on the floor in bloody clothes. The girl is barely alive and can hardly utter a word. Ariel wonders how this happened and notices something strange nearby. There is a note in the blood on the floor that says, "All this is retribution for today." The saint begins to worry greatly about the girl's life at this moment. Despite the priestess's efforts to heal Anna, it now seems impossible. The girl's wound is too big, and if nothing is done, she will die. At this moment, memories associated with Anna begin to flash through Ariel's head. She promised from the very beginning to be faithful to her and to take care of her. Anna even promised to follow her mistress to the ends of the earth. And in any situation, the girl did not give up and was determined to always be there. All this makes Ariel grab onto her ceiling pendant. At one point, the saint tears it off herself to release the sacred power. After this, Ariel puts her hands on and begins to heal the maid. A stream of sacred power appears around, which resembles the bright rays of the sun. The saint is familiar with the feeling of pain when sharp blades pierce the body. But she doesn't want this to be Anna's last moment. The girl will not allow death to take the soul of her servant Anna. After all, just as she chose her, so Ariel is now choosing Anna. She does not intend to give up and will fight for her life to the last. And while everyone watches the saint in amazement, she tries to save the servant. At this moment, Ariel very strongly asks the gods to help her. The saint continues to pray despite the fact that she has revealed her gift to everyone. And she doesn't take her hands off the girl, trying with all her might to heal her. The loss of Anna will be an unbearable pain for her, as she became very close to her. And finally, the girl's wounds heal and she opens her eyes. All her clothes are still covered in blood, but you can tell from Anna's face that she is okay now. The sacred power stops emitting light, and Ariel speaks the maid's name. Then she puts her hands to her head and asks how she feels. But instead of words, tears begin to flow from Anna's eyes. And the eyewitnesses at this time are delighted that they just saw how 9 gods helped the saint. A true miracle happened in Ilium as Ariel saved the maid. Everyone begins to admire the saint and ask the 9 gods to accompany her. But suddenly she hears a familiar voice that scares her. Right behind the girl is Rayhouse, to whom she will now have to explain everything. Ariel was so eager to save Anna that she didn't even think about the high priest's reaction. After this, she stands in front of him and tries to come up with a trick again, but he doesn't even intend to listen to her and bends down. After this, what Ariel had feared from the very beginning happens. After all, the high priest kisses her foot, although according to the plot, Camilla should be in her place. At this moment, the saint blushes and doesn't know how to react. And he, with loving eyes, tells us that he likes this turn of events. After some time, Ariel feels that today the pain was duller, and yet she did the right thing by buying that bracelet back then. It protects the body of the one who wears it, and the result exceeded all expectations. Ariel then decides to take a bath and thinks about how confusing everything is. First, she went to the palace and clashed with Alberto there. Then she returned to the temple and found Anna dying. Besides, I can't get that incident with Rayhouse out of my head. Perhaps this is exactly the ending that was needed for today. But the man promised to investigate this case most thoroughly. He was probably talking about what happened to Anna, not about her deception. In any case, it turns out that someone from outside entered the temple and tried to kill the maid. And the note on the floor means that only one person could have done it. If Anna had died because of the saint, Ariel would not have been able to forgive herself. It seems she has disturbed the wrong character in the novel. At this moment, Ariel receives notifications that the gods are blessing her. At first it irritates her, but then she decides to calm down. After all, one cannot simply squander one's powers and blessings. So she decides to relax and let the gods do their good work. Before going to bed, Ariel thinks about the problem that Rayhouse now knows about her secret. Although he is glad that the girl is a real saint, this still does not save the situation. She still blushes when she remembers his face. Not only did Ariel expose the false saint, but she also demonstrated her sacred power to people. Everything has completely gotten out of control and the girl doesn't know what to do. Ariel eventually gave up her life as a false saint, and she received a kiss from the high priest as a sign of obedience. At this time, one of the stores announced that they were not serving residents of the 10th and subsequent districts. Some noble girls even think that these cannot even be called buildings. And the seller doesn't even intend to waste his precious time on those who don't have a lot of money. Our heroine read about this in the original story of the novel. The capital of the empire, Ilid, can be divided into 15 districts. Districts 1 through 3 belong to the nobility and respected people, and commoners live in districts 4 through 10, and all the districts that come after the 10th belong to the poor. Since Ariel's clothes were now shabby, she was refused acceptance as a guest. And all the girls act so arrogantly, as if she was not a person at all. They continue to mock and make evil jokes about the poor girl. But one of them suddenly asks her friends not to be so rude. However, this is followed by a mockery that Ariel can serve in a rich house. The saint looks at them and understands that the further, the merrier. At that moment, the door opens and a man appears behind Ariel. The seller's expression immediately changes, and he is ready to serve the guest from head to toe. Ariel turns her head towards the man and realizes that she sees a familiar face again. Right now, standing in front of her is Cass Lloyd, whom she never expected to meet. The seller doesn't take his eyes off the marquis and asks him to wait a little. But he does this only to order the beggar to be thrown out. However, Cass stops the man and asks him not to do it. Afterwards, he tells Ariel that it looks like she's hiding her face again, and kissing her hand, he praises the girl for helping the poor fellows in the lowest place of the city. It is worth seeing at this moment the faces of those present whose mouths are open. But Cass doesn't open his eyes from the girl and says that he's glad to see her. At this moment, Ariel takes off her hood, and everyone realizes that they are facing a saint. The Marquise then reports that the girl apparently wants to choose a building for the temple enterprise, and Ariel is amazed at his ability to make things up on the fly. But she decides to play along and says that Hagen refused her this. Now she will have to go to another intermediary and tell the high priest about this. It will also be necessary to discuss the criteria of the divine documents of Ilium and revise the names recorded in them. After this, he and the Marquis are about to leave, and Hagen tries to apologize. Cass decides to use this chance to get one last piss on the unscrupulous salesman. He reports that he was just about to donate 5,000 francs to the saint's cause. And Hagen starts shouting that he will give the money right now. He decides to give them as a donation to the temple and for forgiveness. Ariel gets a nice boost in her account, and she and Cass go out. And the girl has nothing to worry about, since she doesn't owe anything to anyone. The saint is very surprised that she does not have to account for these funds. Therefore, she offers the Marquis to divide them in half, but he refuses. However, Ariel now wonders how long Cass has been following her. To this, the man replies that he has been doing this since the moment she left the temple. It turns out that the Marquis had business in Ilium, and he briefly stopped by the temple. There he noticed that the saint had taken advantage of the confusion and fled. He heard the priests praising her, and apparently this confused the girl. This is not surprising because people saw real sacred power. It turns out that it was Ariel who healed the wounded bird Cass. He guessed this, especially after the undisguised contempt directed at him. And now the Blue Wing is doing well, and the dogs are also training with him. However, Cass wanted to ask if the saint had intended to hide her power, but apparently that girl was so dear to her that Ariel decided to give up everything for her. And at this moment, the saint begins to feel sad because everything is a little different. And what's even sadder is that the Marquis thinks exactly as he said. After all, initially she saved Anna not only because it was she. The girl did this because she has power and can help people. Even if the Marquis had been in her place, she would have done exactly the same. Ariel did exactly what a saint should do, even though she didn't think about it. She was simply acting according to her convictions, and the Marquis might find this decision strange. But the saint would not allow Anna to die just for the sake of her secret, because then she would suffer from nightmares and a sense of loss. And Cass realizes that Ariel is hinting at their different views on values. Ariel confirms the Marquis's assumptions, and he laughs at her categoricalness. He then asks the saint if she has any plans right now. The girl is not busy with anything, and then Cass invites her to go on a date with him. After some time, our heroine enjoys the taste of the food she ate. She was delighted with how sweet the dessert on her plate was. Ariel invites the Marquis to try a piece, otherwise she will eat it all herself. And it's not that she's hungry, it's just that dessert has a special place of honor in her stomach. Besides, not eating such a delicious cake is a real crime. At that moment, she remembers Cass asking her about her plans for the day. And after that, he immediately offered to go on a date as payment for the money he had acquired. It is obvious that he had deliberately deceived himself from the start in order to bring his plan to fruition. At this time, Cass reports that he did not expect such a reaction to sweets from the saint. And for the first time, he looks so fascinatedly at a person who is eating. Ariel immediately blushes, as she didn't think she looked so pleased. Based on her reaction, Cass thinks he said something rude, and the girl confirms his suspicions. And as payment for this rudeness, she makes him eat a piece of cake. She asks not to force her to eat and to enjoy it alone. Ariel holds a piece of cake on her fork and waits for Cass to finally decide to fulfill her request. After that, he finally eats the candy, and the girl asks his opinion. And Cass explains that it tastes much better than a couple of days ago when he ate the same thing. At this time, the gods cannot just look at the delicacies, and their mouths begin to water. The Marquis wonders if the saint is not interested in learning anything about him. It seems to him that every time he is the only one asking about something, and it's time for Ariel to say something. After this, the gods begin to throw their ideas at her and suggest asking about Cass's muscles and bed preferences. But the girl has another proposal, which she addresses to the man. Ariel confidently announces that she will be the one paying for lunch today. The saint had been thinking about this ever since she and the Marquis entered the cafe. Since she earned money with Cass's help, it would be fair to treat him. And the Marquis begins to laugh at the thought that he is always arrogant towards Ariel. Nevertheless, the girl promises to buy something even more expensive next time. However, she doesn't remember Cass smiling like that, because in the novel he was a sociopath. And after finishing her tea, Ariel decides to order something else before she leaves. The Marquis decides that the girl is not full, but she is going to bring it to Anna. She's already feeling better, but sweets should please her. This concern surprises Cass so much that he even expresses his jealousy. Today the cakes seem especially sweet to him, and he doesn't even want to share them. Meanwhile, in the Imperial Palace, passions are only growing. All the dishes around are scattered by the Empress, who is furious about the recent situation. Alberto tries to justify himself and says that Annie was definitely convinced of the fake saint. However, Rosa is sure that Ariel is not at all stupid and definitely knew everything about the saint from Tiago. Most likely, it was she who came up with this trap and deceived Alberto with the help of Annie. Moreover, the saint has a close relationship with Kyle, and she brazenly deceived everyone about the exploding statue. Alberto adds that they were united from the very beginning and drove them into a trap. But Rose is unhappy that her brother fell for their trick, and now the Emperor is angry with her. Therefore, now no excuses before the enraged Empress will help Alberto. However, he promises his sister that he will not make a similar mistake again. To do this, he suggests inviting the saint to a hunting festival in 10 days. And she will have no reason to refuse, since the festival is dedicated to the god of justice, Estus. If they can turn public opinion around to force the girl to participate, it won't be hard to get rid of her. Plus, they have a killer who never earned his money. The next morning, the maid Anna tries to call out to the saint. She comes running to her with the news that the broken bed in her room has been replaced. But Ariel is a little embarrassed by the fact that Anna called her sleeping place that. However, from the blow from the saint in the dream, one side broke and a real hole appeared on the other. And there is no other way to describe this bed other than broken. At this point, CL starts to blush because of the broken bed. But Ariel dreamed that she was riding a horse through the forest and encountering monsters. She had to kill them with her bare hands, and it was obvious that the attack on Anna had taken its toll on her. And in connection with this, she decides to inquire whether the maid is really feeling better. And Anna explains that thanks to the healing and the delicious strawberry cake, she feels great. Ariel finds it warms her heart to see her maid so cheerful. However, her plan to gain independence could only work if everyone considered her a false saint. And now that Ariel has become real, she will have to forget about escaping. Even the attitude of believers towards her changed, and they began to respect her more. And Dwayne even begged the saint to forgive him for his lack of trust. And the gods who are watching her are enjoying the attention shown to the girl. But if only everything would be like before, when no one cared about Ariel. At this point, Anna wonders if the criminal who attacked her hasn't been found yet. She is very afraid that this man might attack the saint. To this, Ariel replies that the criminal had to pay a large sum to enter the temple, and in Anna's circle there must be someone whom she has offended quite a lot. But since she doesn't have such a person, it's Ariel who needs to apologize. After all, the killer was specifically going after the saint, but an innocent girl suffered. Besides, Ariel has an excellent informant who will find out everything about the mercenary. After some time, Rayhouse informs the saint about the upcoming hunting festival. But the girl doesn't have to be there, so he just sends a rejection letter. Instead, he will send priests there, who are needed in case of healing injured guests. At this moment, Ariel thinks about what the high priest told her. Her reaction gives him the impression that the girl is interested in participating. However, the only thing that worries her is that many in Ilium are discussing her passivity. They were probably talking about the festival, but she was worried about something completely different. Little time has passed since the killer attacked Anna, and now she is called to the palace. It is obvious that the Empress has something in mind if she wants to meet her so much. After thinking about all this, Ariel decides to agree to participate. And she reports this to Rayhouse, who clearly did not expect such a turn of events. The girl explains that she does this not because of the rumors, but only to unwind. The daily routine was already starting to tire her out, and the festival was an excellent solution to the problem. The high priest has no choice but to agree to the girl's request. But besides this, Ariel has another interesting proposal. Even though they started with a lie with Rayhouse, now she actually has real power. Therefore, the girl demands that her allowance be increased in accordance with her situation. Ariel is serious and wants to receive a salary that matches hers. In addition to this, the girl also expects to receive a bonus for participating in events. After all, every time the temple receives a large donation for her appearance in the palace, and 30% of this would suit her, but this news shocks the man. However, he nods affirmatively and agrees with this demand. Rayhouse had heard of saints who had refused money, but he had never seen one who had turned around. And to Ariel's surprise, he promises to pay her 3,000 francs for each event. And starting next month, the man will increase her monthly salary. Although he thinks it is greedy, it still does not seem that the saint is going to leave the temple. So, despite the significant costs, Rayhouse is very happy with what is happening. What confuses Ariel more is that he doesn't even care why she hid her power from him. But the look in his amber eyes takes her breath away again. Before, it seemed to her that she was shackling a man whom she would soon have to leave. But now Ariel feels like she's locking herself in a cage. And the irony of the whole situation is that she is also humming joyfully while doing this. At this point, Rayhouse announces that he also has a proposal. A man offers to play a game of chess for a wish. The wish will not be at all complicated, and he hopes that the saint will agree. A few days later, the day of the hunting festival arrived, and the entire empire was in anticipation. The carriage with the saint goes to the palace, and Dwayne again accompanies the girl. But due to the large flow of guests, a protracted traffic jam formed. At this point, the gods express their dissatisfaction with the prolonged wait, and Ariel scolds them for it. Still, the girl is glad she didn't have to wear that weird choker. Who would have thought that Ariel and Rayhouse would make a bet using chess? And if it weren't for Hesed, the saint, who doesn't know the rules of the game, would now be riding with a choker around her neck. But thanks to the gods, she was able to put Rayhouse in a no-win position in this game. His surprise knew no bounds, and he could not explain his loss. Ariel said at that moment that she had suspected something was wrong from the very beginning. And it turns out that Rayhouse wants to give her a location-tracking choker. But the man explains that this was done to prevent the girl from getting into trouble. However, Rayhouse is now only interested in how the saint was able to win. This time, he put all his strength into it and didn't even give in to it. And Ariel asks the man to prepare himself before she reveals her secret. Hesed is already taking on a solemn appearance, and the saint reports that she was helped by the ghostly king of chess. And only in the carriage does Ariel thank God for his help, although he is offended that he was left out. But that's not all, because after the loss, Rayhouse himself had to wear the choker. For him, it's like a master and a slave, so it's important for him to know how long he should wear it. and although Ariel suggested that he take off the choker immediately, the man still showed up with it to see her off. However, now it is much more interesting to find out what the Empress has planned. Moreover, the rumors suddenly died down, as if someone had deliberately fanned them. But Ariel is absolutely certain that she will not dance to the Empress's tune. Therefore, the girl decides to prepare in advance for unforeseen situations. Suddenly, a hand appears next to her window, holding out an apple to her. This man turns out to be Cass, who again surprised Ariel with his appearance. And the saint looks in shock, first at the apple, then at the Marquis of Lloyd. And at that moment, he asks her to eat the fruit that he bought for 10 francs. However, even a whole box would not cost more than 2 francs, but Cass did not even think about the price and would have been glad if he could also buy the saint's favor. Ariel still finds it strange that the Marquis doesn't look anything like the sociopath from the novel. It seems the character has changed after all, and she decides to find out where he is heading. Cass, like the saint, is going to the festival, and judging by the number of carriages, it is a major event. But this year it promises to be special, as all the attention of the nobility is focused on the Empress's pregnancy. Previously, most people supported the Crown Prince, but he was indifferent to the struggle for power despite his excellent talents. But the Empress is a different person, and her minions received the same power as the prince. This is why everyone is now interested in the child that is in her womb. And to see the imperial strife, Cass decided to come to the festival. Ariel really felt the tension between the Empress and Kyle. But if Rose gives birth to a son, the Crown Prince's situation will worsen. At this moment, Cass remembers the High Priest, who is now greeting the guests. Since Ariel finds herself without a companion, the Marquis offers his candidacy. He is going to accompany the girl, and it will be an honor for him. At this moment, Ariel remembers that the Marquis said the same thing at the market. However, she asks for forgiveness, as she will have a knight from the temple with her. Moreover, she does not plan to participate personally, as she has not been feeling well lately. Cass expresses his regret, as he really wanted to protect the saint. This makes her laugh a lot, since the festival does not portend any threat. However, the Marquis asks the girl not to go to the hunting grounds under any pretext. Cass says this because he has heard some bad things, and he is confident in the information. Ariel doesn't show any surprise and thanks you for your concern. The Marquis basically expected that the girl, as always, was already aware of what was happening. At this moment, the saint, with complete indifference on her face, begins to eat the apple. The road clears and Cass says goodbye, hoping to see her at the festival. Meanwhile, everyone had already pitched their tents and prepared the camp. The Emperor and his wife watch the upcoming spectacle. And Dwayne honors the saint for her speech at the festival today. However, all the girl's attention is focused on the Empress. She wonders when this woman will take her step to make her plans come true. Ariel doesn't like this lull, and her arrival here can't be a coincidence. At this time, Kyle is nearby, carefully watching the girl. After this, he approaches the saint and decides to turn to her. The prince extends his hand to her and asks her to bless him before the hunt. Ariel is very surprised, because just recently Kyle was walking around completely gloomy. Nevertheless, she pronounces a blessing, taking the prince's hand. But suddenly the god Ciel announces that he blesses the girl. However, the saint asked for it not for herself, but for the crown prince. At this time, Kyle looks at the saint and her confusion with bewilderment. He asks her to stop counting crows and finally fulfill his request. If Ariel is so nervous, then she shouldn't have come here because she's nothing but trouble. And at that moment, the girl understands that the prince is showing his concern in this way. But he begins to joke that, under the pretext of blessing, Ariel decided to hold his hand. The Emperor notices their communication and understands that his son likes the saint. However, it is unknown what the girl herself thinks about the crown prince. His wife explains that the girl used to spend all her time in the temple due to poor health. Perhaps it's worth giving this couple a push, and Rose has just the right plan. The Empress suggests that the saint also take part in the hunting festival. After all, she has come such a long way and can enjoy hunting in the company of the prince. But Kyle is against this, as it is dangerous to go into the forest without special training. And his father is confident that the prince will be able to protect the girl, and this will bring them even closer together. Moreover, Rose adds that the high priest personally consecrated and purified the entire forest, but there are many monsters there again. In the past, saints would visit the streams every few years for the benefit of the townspeople in the Kingston Mountains. Shouldn't Ariel help keep this tradition going this year? Now the girl understands what the Empress has planned and gets up from her seat. However, she does not want to ride in the carriage and asks to give her Alberto's horse. But that is not all, as the saint asks that the Empress's brother be seated in the carriage instead of her. Upon learning of this, Alberto becomes furious and refuses to give up his horse. However, Ariel reminds him that he ran over a boy a month ago. It happened on a crowded street during a festival, and there are witnesses. Dwayne was also present that day and can confirm everything. At this moment, the Emperor asks Alberto if the saint is telling the truth. He doesn't even have time to justify himself before Ariel demands that he sit in the carriage with such driving skills. Otherwise, he would show disrespect to the members of the imperial family and the visiting nobility. Kyle was there the whole time and remains pleased with the girl's idea. And to give her words more force, he takes her by the shoulder and supports her in front of the Emperor. The Crown Prince then explains that he is ready to protect the saint. Rose tries to turn everything in her favor, but the Emperor does not listen to her. He asks Alberto to board the saint's carriage and take part in the festival. However, he notices the saint's dress and assumes that she will be uncomfortable. Ariel didn't even think about the fact that she really couldn't ride a horse in this state. But the girl doesn't lose her nerve and decides to finish off the Knight Alberto even more. After all, if it turns out that she will ride his horse, then he will not be against lending her clothes. And after some time, the saint's carriage sets off for the forest, along with Alberto, who is dissatisfied inside. He had to change clothes with the saint, and such an insult is like death. Ariel is now a fox to him, constantly putting a spoke in his wheel. And sitting in a woman's dress, he now dreams of how he will finish off this girl. Suddenly, Alberto felt as if he was struck by an electric shock from a strong shaking. The entire carriage almost falls apart and the coachman has to stop abruptly. After this, the knight comes out of it to check what is going on. But at that moment, an arrow from a bow flies right past his head. It plunges its tip into the carriage, and Alberto is overcome with horror. A crowd of bandits appears before him, taking him for a saint. The man understands that these are his mercenaries and tries to explain everything. After Alberto reveals that he is not a saint, there is a momentary pause between them. The bandits heard that the saint was a bit dumb, but the stories about her beauty were complete lies. However, they ask her not to be offended, as they need to work for the money. And since she is a true saint, after her death the gods will send the girl to a good place. Screams are heard throughout the forest, reaching Ariel, and she asks Kyle if he heard that monster-like sound, but the Crown Prince reports that he heard nothing at all. He then turns his attention to the girl's horse-riding skills. Ariel replies that she learned this in her free time, and that it's good that Alberto's clothes fit her. After this, Kyle explains that the girl exceeds his expectations every time. However, the girl's back was already stiff, and she would clearly feel better in the carriage. Moreover, the knights from the temple suddenly fell ill with poisoning, and she is worried about this situation. And the Crown Prince promises that he will ask Rayhouse to restore order there. And yet, if Ariel had known about everything earlier, she would have gone in the carriage. At this point, the man decides to put an end to this and takes the girl off the horse. Then she suddenly finds herself on the ground and closes her eyes in fear. And Kyle explains that if she were riding in a carriage, she would have to entertain herself with someone annoying. So now he invites her to sit on his cloak and rest. Ariel is surprised to see how the Crown Prince takes care of her back. She then recalls how she offered the knight Alberto to change into her dress. But it looked terrible both in the eyes of Kyle and in the eyes of the gods. And yet, now they are at the hunting festival, and the prince will have to protect the girl alone. But it was still better than if she had to walk through the forest alone. After this, Ariel asks the man to hurry up and enjoy the hunt. However, Kyle explains that he is not going to participate this time. And it has nothing to do with defeating monsters, because sometimes you need to be careful. It was obvious that the Crown Prince also guessed about the Empress's plan. At this moment, Ariel and Kyle hear some strange sounds. Even the horse is frightened by this loud noise and rears up. Then Alberto's horse suddenly takes off and runs off into the depths of the forest. Kyle explains that it was worth tying her up first, and now the girl doesn't know what to do. After this, he grabs the hilt of his sword and says that it doesn't matter anymore. He asks the girl not to be afraid of anything and to wait for him in this place. And the saint raises her eyes upward and freezes in horror. In front of her appears a huge monster with glowing eyes and a green body. The girl realizes that it is a troll, and Kyle prepares to attack him. Ariel sees the monster's huge legs running towards them. The troll then swings his club and is about to crush the prince. But there is not a drop of fear in Kyle's eyes, and he intends to attack the monster. After a minute, Ariel decides to open her eyes and realizes that she is still alive. She looks at the monster and doesn't understand why he suddenly stopped. It looks like someone cast magic on the troll. And at that moment, Kyle calmly puts his sword back on his belt. Suddenly, the monster's body shatters into 1,000 pieces, chopped up by the prince. The girl doesn't understand what happened, because just a second ago the monster was standing there. Seal jumps for joy after such a sight, and the monster's carcass begins to stink. However, this cannot be, since Ariel did not even notice anything. Even though the girl was right behind the prince, she didn't even see him swing his sword. Apparently, this is the power of the Swordmaster that the entire continent is talking about. And Kyle turns to the saint and says that the adjutants once advised something. At this moment, Ariel listens attentively to the man, amazed by his talent. And he explains that there are rumors among the knights about a monster prince. That's why he hid his smile during the murder, and his face became like a plaster mask. Then he wonders what the saint will say to this, and whether she is also afraid of him. At this moment, Ariel doesn't know what to answer to a prince with such a peculiarity. However, after thinking a little, she replies that she is not afraid of him. Of course, if Kyle were her enemy, she would be trembling with horror. But now everything is the other way around, and the prince is her ally who protected the girl. So she advises Kyle to stop thinking of himself as a monster. And it doesn't matter what others say behind his back, because he simply remains himself. Although one must agree with the words of the adjutants, since such a face will later appear in nightmares. Anyone who laughs with a sword in his hand causes fear in those around him. And Kyle replies that the further she goes, the less she restrains herself. But the thing is that Ariel simply trusts her ally. The prince did not expect this, and it is becoming increasingly difficult for him to understand everything the girl is thinking. Now all that remains is to figure out how they can travel with just one horse. After all, Alberto's horse ran away immediately after hearing the sounds of the monster. However, Kyle tells the girl that he has an idea. The gods begin to smirk at this point, and Ariel doesn't like this scenario. So she gets ahead of the prince and offers to borrow a horse from someone passing by. But in a place teeming with monsters, taking someone's horse means wishing death on that person. Although, to be honest, Kyle really likes this option, and Ariel suggests forgetting about it. However, what if the prince's horse gets tired of carrying two people at once? But Kyle says not to worry about it, as Lisa is a wonderful warhorse. This horse can easily carry two people. After this, the man asks the saint not to delay and to quickly climb up. After some time, Ariel and the crown prince ride on the same horse and continue their journey. The girl sits so close to Kyle that she already regrets this decision. She is very uncomfortable and annoyed by the fact that she is constantly pushing against his chest. So she asks Kyle for permission to move, otherwise she will just fall. Moreover, the girl is worried that it is impossible to pick up speed because of her. At this point, the prince declares that he would first like Ariel to put her naughty hand away. Even the gods blush at this scene and ask the saint to measure the size of the man's hips. Suddenly, the girl begins to blush from shame and horror at what is happening. The saint abruptly removes her hand and apologizes for the incident. Ariel was so uncomfortable riding that she didn't notice how she grabbed the prince's thigh. Suddenly, the horse stops walking slowly and suddenly breaks forward. The girl starts to get indignant and doesn't understand why he's driving so fast. And Kyle cuddles up to the saint and explains that if she had deliberately laid her hand on him, they would have definitely finished the hunt. In response, she only asks the prince to move away a little and not speak so ambiguously. The girl could have told him a lot more, but for some reason this time she remained silent. After a while, they find themselves at the place, and Ariel is staring at something. In front of her stands a huge monument, which she must cleanse with her power. She doesn't know how to properly perform the cleansing and simply puts her hand on the stone. At this moment, the inscriptions begin to glow a bright blue color. Ariel pours her power into this monument, and a glowing wind appears around it. After this, the girl opens her eyes and cannot believe what is happening. Everything around, including the huge monument, begins to emit light. It's so beautiful, as if there were many stars dancing in the air. She asks the prince if the purification process always happens like this. But to his surprise, Kyle sees such a sight for the first time. Suddenly, a heavy downpour hits him and Ariel. The saint already thinks that it was she who called him with her purification. A clear day was specifically chosen for the hunt, but the temple's weather forecasts are not always accurate. But there's nothing to be done now, and we'll have to look for a place to take shelter from the rain. The crown prince begins to look around and makes a proposal. On the way to this place, he saw a cave, and on horseback they would quickly get there. After some time, our heroes find themselves in that same dark cave. But Ariel's already so wet and cold that she starts sneezing. It was just warm and sunny, but suddenly thunder and lightning struck. She felt so cold from the rain that she felt like she was about to catch a cold. At this moment, Kyle throws his cloak over her shoulders to keep the girl warm. He heard that Ariel showed her holy power, but he still can't believe it. He is even more tormented by the question of why the girl hid all this, and she silently thinks and replies that she herself doesn't believe it. Moreover, she did not always have this power, and after receiving it, the girl still continues to feel like a fake. But Kyle is curious how Ariel can doubt after everything that happened. There is nothing that can be done about this, since the saint considers herself lazy. The crown prince should understand this perfectly well, because he knows everything about the girl. However, at some point he saw changes in Ariel, and it seems to him that now there is a completely different person in front of him. The girl explains that everyone has turning points in life, and Kyle agrees. But in his opinion, everything cannot be so simple and abrupt. At the moment of these words, he begins to stroke Ariel's face with his hand, and she is enveloped in shock. She avoids his touch and replies that she is simply trying to live differently. However, recently the girl is not sure that she is doing everything right. After all, nothing has changed since she decided to live differently. Moreover, it seems to her that she is going down an even more wrong path. Kyle can't judge which life is better because only a girl can judge that. But in his opinion, now he finds it much more pleasant to look at Ariel. And he clearly likes people who come straight and act openly. After these words, Ariel tries to answer something, but her face is illuminated by a bright light. A lightning bolt with a huge charge flashes right next to them. Ariel tries to cover herself with her hand, and Kyle protects her with his body. After being struck by lightning, our heroes try to figure out what happened. They look at a smoldering piece of stone from which smoke is emanating. At this moment, the girl realizes that the flash was the result of a lightning strike. Following this, comments begin to pour in from the gods, and she realizes whose handiwork this is. Kyle reassures Ariel and says they are lucky that lightning just struck nearby, and since the rain has already stopped, they can slowly return back. After some time, Ariel comes across a camp prepared for the festival. She is already standing by her carriage and is getting ready to go to the temple. The girl decides not to linger, as trouble may await her. 2 of the Empress's best servants were killed, and Alberto returned in a terrible state. But Ariel wonders if Kyle's refusal to participate in the hunt is connected to the Empress's inner circle. He says he knows nothing about it, but the prince's face gives it all away. After this, the girl gives Kyle his cloak and thanks him for his help. And in response, he grabs her hand and is not ready to let go of the saint so easily. After all, how can he say goodbye to a girl and not kiss her hand? After this, he looks up at her and promises to return something too. With that, they say goodbye, and Ariel slowly removes her hand. The coachman grabs the reins and gives the command to the horses to set off. Now the saint goes to the temple, and Kyle follows her carriage with his eyes. All this time, the girl sits inside and feels very embarrassed. And the crown prince can't wait to meet Ariel again. The next morning, the saint is already in the room of the Ilium temple. But she feels so bad that she feels like she's going to die. An unexpected long horse ride and rain took their toll. Moreover, Ariel was worried about the Crown Prince's strange reaction. And as soon as she arrived at the temple, she immediately looked through the records of the hunt. Miller, who taught the prince the affairs of the empire, died during the last festival, and they were released by Baron Dmitri and the young heir of Baron Ludwig. Kyle requested a reinvestigation but was denied. After their conversation, the saint became more cautious because Ariel was killed by one of the 3 male characters. Suddenly, there is a sharp knock, but it doesn't seem to come from the door. Ariel starts looking towards the window and realizes that the sound was coming from there. The girl pulls back the curtains and sees a boy from the Thieves' Guild behind the glass. He stands calmly in front of her window, and Ariel doesn't understand how he appeared there. The temple is currently under very strict security, and her room is on the 4th floor. Could it be that the boy is some kind of sword master, since nothing seems to bother him? And the child explains that he simply climbed the wall as usual. After all, he is from the Thieves' Guild, and he pulls tricks like this all the time. And the most important thing now is that he obtained the necessary information. We will talk about Cronia, which is an unusual plant, and the Empress's steward bought this flower through Deviaman. Ariel was very surprised by this information, since Deviaman is not an easy guild. It includes magicians with a deep history who are considered the most powerful and dangerous. But the nobility often turns to them to do something bad. After this, the boy takes out a piece of paper and hands it to the girl. It has the guild's emblem on it and information about it on the other side. The girl asks what needs to be done to get in touch with them, and the child explains that there is very little information about this and it will be difficult to meet. But he also heard that the guild members always come to the night magic market. At the same time, the boy obtained information about the killer, who now has a grudge against Alberto. The Empress's brother tried to get rid of the mercenary, and Ariel is pleased with this. After this, she hands the boy a bag containing his reward, but suddenly she snatches it back and says that he has to do one more thing first. After all, if you think about it, the saint still doesn't even know the child's name. At this moment, the guy with surprised eyes says that his name is Noah. Ariel is very pleased to hear this and gives him the award again. Her smile makes Noah feel embarrassed, and the saint hopes to meet him again and work with him. After this, he takes his money in his hands and reciprocates the girl's feelings. In that case, Ariel already has several tasks prepared for the boy. She gives him a letter and asks him to deliver it to the Crown Prince. Since he often goes out on inspections, Noah won't even have to enter the palace. The saint counts on the boy's help and smiles sweetly at him. Noah takes on the task and promises not to let his client down. As darkness falls, Ariel heads to one of the ill-fated areas. The girl rode a horse alone and experienced both shock and surprise. She leaves the horse and realizes that she has reached her destination. Obviously, right now in front of her is that very same market that is open only on the first night of the month. Unlike the houses near the palace, the condition of this place is deplorable. To prevent dark mages from learning of her power, Ariel wore a sealing pendant. She also deactivated the blessing just in case and is now a little worried. And some time ago, the girl was summoned by Rayhouse to show her power to the believers. Now many people know the saint by sight, and this is not to her advantage. However, now she feels as if there is no turning back. She will always have to play the role of a saint, and this makes Ariel's head split into pieces. Luckily, Camilla is due to appear, and she will gladly give up her place to her. Thoughts about a future calm life give the girl courage, and she steps forward. Just in case, she has the Hesed bracelet with her, so there is nothing to worry about. But suddenly, someone from behind calls the girl and calls her a saint. She doesn't understand how this could happen right after she thought about it. And the guy tells her that he warned her about the danger of appearing here alone. This boy turns out to be Noah from the Thieves' Guild, whom Ariel did not expect to see. He explains that naive buyers are often deceived at the night market. The boy, of course, doesn't think that the saint can be deceived so easily, but he still decides to be her night guide and accompany her to the market. Noah assures the saint that with him she will be safe in this place. Ariel is very touched by his support and decides to rely on the boy. They go inside and feel that the atmosphere is completely different from that of a regular market. There are almost no stalls, and the only customers are magicians in suspicious outfits. And all the ingredients on sale look equally disgusting. Suddenly, the girl notices one very interesting product. It turns out to be the egg of a magical creature, which was received only today. The seller notes that Ariel doesn't understand magical creatures, and that this could give her away. That's why she calls herself an apprentice who came at the request of the master magician. The merchant seemed to believe the girl and continued to talk about the egg. In a sense, this creature can be called a monster, but they usually obey their instincts and destroy everything in their path. But magical creatures can interact with their owner. They can be considered as something like animals with abilities. And if they are tamed, they perform the assigned tasks perfectly. Noah remarks that this egg may be of high rank. And if you think about it, as a child our heroine always wanted to have a puppy. Maybe this is just the case and she is interested in the cost of the egg. But the merchant tells her the enormous sum of 1,000 francs for this product. However, trading in eggs is prohibited, and such a rank is generally rare. Despite all the seller's arguments, Ariel still considers this a high price. After this, she leaves and leaves the merchant's stall empty. The saint nevertheless decided to buy the egg, which the boy now lays. Noah is amazed at how the girl managed to cut the price in half. And after some time, they find themselves where Ariel initially wanted to go. This is the Deviaman Guild, which has an inverted skull emblem on its emblem. Ariel approaches the two guards and decides to address them. The girl shows coins and says that she wants to buy something. The guild leader is interested in ancient treasures, and Ariel purchased it from her magic shop. The guards report that this is an amazing item, and it is difficult to obtain. The saint replies that she has her own special supplier, and the man begins to twist the magic ring on his finger. He then says that he agrees to take the guest to the head of the guild. Rumors that he personally conducts coin transactions turned out to be true, and it's all thanks to Noah. But from now on she will go alone, since the boy has nothing to do there. Ariel reassures Noah and adds that she has a plan and he doesn't need to worry. Then she pats the boy on the head to encourage him a little. But in reality, the saint is very worried that Ciel's blessing will not be able to protect the boy. After this, Ariel walks forward and the door slams behind her. For the first time, she sees a building so gloomy that if she were to go missing, no one would even know about it. Suddenly, Ariel hears someone's voice coming from the darkness. After this, a man's hand appears, pointing to a coin. The stranger calls her sacred and says that the price for her is not too high. In front of the girl is the head of the guild, who is sitting in a chair. The coin is worth no more than 100 francs, and he is interested in the true reason for the stranger's arrival. Ariel tells the leader that she would like to purchase the crown. However, the man reports that they do not supply this plant. But the girl does not give up and explains that she knows about acquiring the crown through the guild. And this was said by Empress Rose, who held a secret meeting. Suddenly, the leader interrupts the stranger and puts his hand to her face. The girl tells him things that cannot be ignored. Ariel feels the magic of a man who wants to know about her. But such tricks with her are useless thanks to the ceiling pendant. Therefore, the saint introduces herself as Celestine, and the magician is going to erase her memory. He wants her to forget all the words of the Empress and this meeting with him. Although the girl agrees with the chief, something still bothers him. For some reason, he gets an unpleasant feeling when using magic. After this, he finishes and finally lets the girl go home. And Ariel, with a stony face, walks out of the guild as if enchanted. But she simply played her role well and is now happy with the meeting that took place. After all, this should be enough for the guild to draw its sword against the Empress. Well, Ariel is done here, and now we can return to the temple. A few days later, the bound Noah is thrown at the prince's feet. He sees a letter from Ariel and doesn't understand where it came from, and how a guy from the Thieves Guild suddenly became the saint's assistant. And Noah replies that he just does small errands for pay. Kyle sees that the boy is smart and decides to give him a job too. From this moment on, the boy is obliged to report to him about the saint's movements. For this, he is ready to pay him 10 gold pieces worth 100 francs. If Noah works well, he promises to make his life comfortable. However, to the Crown Prince's surprise, the boy refuses. He does not want to betray the saint and cannot accept this offer. At this moment, the prince draws his sword and puts it to the guy's throat. Kyle tells him that instead of money, he offers him to spare his life. But even under the threat of death, the boy refuses to betray. He confidently states that he will not report the saint's movements. After these words, the prince puts away his sword and says that he had no doubt about the boy. And if he had accepted his offer, he would have killed him that very second. Then he wishes him that his unbending will not change in the future. Additionally, Kyle praises Noah for being able to elude the Imperial Knights. If in the future the boy wants to learn fencing, he can come to the prince. He feels sorry to leave such a talent as an ordinary thief, and Noah thanks the man. Meanwhile, Kyle is surprised at where Ariel managed to find such a brave boy. Meanwhile, in Ariel's room, notifications from the gods began to pour in. They find it suspicious that she turned off the broadcast and that there is mud on her shoes. And the god Ciel demands an explanation for something incomprehensible that is lying on the table. It turns out to be the egg of a magical creature, and Ariel tries to justify herself by saying that she simply picked it up. But Ciel is wary of this egg, and the saint calls it very cute. The girl is confident that there will soon be no problems with this creature and everything else. During the hunting festival, she channeled sacred power into the stone slab. It seemed to her that she could not only heal all living things, but also promote the growth of plants. And after that, many flowers really did grow near the stone. I wonder if it is possible in this case to direct sacred power to a magical creature. Sometime later, Ariel is having lunch with Rayhouse in the temple garden. He assures the girl that disrespectful rumors will no longer bother her after the demonstration of sacred power. It's a relief for her, because she can't seem to get a bite down after all that nasty stuff. But still, this does not mean that she became more comfortable being treated as a real saint. And Rayhouse has been wearing a choker all this time, and it seems like he has no intention of taking it off. Then he decides to ask the girl something he hasn't asked her before. The high priest wants to know when Ariel gained her powers. She replies that it happened recently, and if it weren't for Anna, she would have continued to hide everything. In that case, Rayhouse wants to know what her reason is. It turns out that despite the display of strength, the girl does not consider herself real. She still continues to think of herself as a false saint. However, Rayhouse thanks her for answering his questions so honestly. But regardless of his gratitude, he is not going to let the girl go. Whether she is a fake saint or a real one, this temple will still remain her home. And Ariel is the real mistress of this place. The girl did not expect to hear such words and thanks the man. After all, the high priest's actions are different from what she read about in the novel. But then she decides to change the subject and asks about preparations for tomorrow. And Rayhouse is not sure whether the girl should go to that place. His Majesty personally wrote to the saint and his pregnant wife asking for a blessing. Meanwhile, in the palace, passions rage between the Emperor and Rose. The woman tries to justify herself by saying that her maid could not buy Cronia. But there is no point in telling the Empress anything anymore, since the plant was found in her chambers. They say it causes symptoms like those of pregnant women, and now the man is waiting for a person from the temple. There they are already preparing to remove the Count Michael family from the lists. After all, they found evidence that he tried to attack a priestess. Therefore, the Emperor asks his wife to prepare for a meeting with a man from the temple. He will find out if Rose really took Cronia and how the child is doing. After all this, the Empress tries to understand how it came to this. Her husband suddenly started talking about Cronia, and evidence of Alberto's attempt on Anna's life emerged. But her brother definitely said that he managed to sort everything out. Is it really true that all her problems are because of this holy girl Ariel? However, how could she have arranged everything so that Rose would be exposed? And if it becomes known that her pregnancy is a lie, then the Empress is finished. These thoughts make the Empress start tearing her hair out. Rose cannot hide her anger and rage at the saint, because of whom her plans are falling apart. As the Empress's position declines, her crown also symbolically falls to the floor. The next day, the saint's carriage arrives at the Emperor's palace. The girl goes inside and blesses His Majesty. And the Emperor says that it was not without reason that he invited the girl today. He wants Ariel to bless his pregnant wife and the child in her womb. Seeing the Empress's gaze, the girl understands that things are not going very well for her. The atmosphere in the palace today takes her breath away. There are no high-ranking nobility or servants here, only knights. Surely all this means that the Emperor is very angry about something. And to congratulate the Empress on the birth of a new life, the saint brought a gift. She created it from pre-prepared croadium stone in honor of the prince's birth. However, the saint does not observe the prince himself and is interested in where he is now. The Emperor calls him a scoundrel, and the girl is very surprised by such a reaction. She senses from the man's condition that it is somewhat different from usual. And Rose explains that the prince is busy now and therefore cannot be present. She then decides to apologize for the incident that happened with the false saint from Tiago. And Ariel smiles sweetly and asks not to talk about it. After all, today she came to bless the child. The Empress today is the cutest thing in the world, but behind her mask hides a real monster. Rose also reports that she heard about what happened recently in the temple. Ariel saved the dying maid and demonstrated sacred power. At that moment, the saint hears the sound of a falling sword behind her. Horror appears in her eyes at what is starting to happen. All her people begin to fall to the floor under the influence of a dangerous poison. Even Dwayne can't do anything about it and also loses consciousness. The saint asks everyone to flee the premises, but there is no one left to escape. Ariel realizes that all of this was originally an insidious plan of the Empress. The woman drops the vial of poison from her hands and laughs triumphantly. She wonders if the saint can simultaneously heal dozens of people poisoned by an unknown poison. At that moment, the bottle rolls to Ariel's feet and the contents seem familiar to her. She read about it when she was looking for information about Chronia. The substance becomes active after the trigger is used. It was not for nothing that the Emperor's condition seemed strange to her, since even before her arrival the poison was everywhere. This means that the Empress chose to go ahead until the very end. However, Rose is still waiting to see if the saint can do anything. Although Ariel is protected by divine power, the poison still continues to spread. However, even a saint remains human and begins to lose strength. In the end, Rose is sure that the girl will not withstand the poison. What infuriates her is that everyone is dancing to the tune of some pathetic saint. But today, this too will come to an end, thanks to a cunning plan. Rose wonders if the girl realized her place before she died. And the Empress is not afraid of being caught, since she has already come up with a legend. The saint, who had become attached to the crown prince with her love, decided to poison everyone. But unfortunately, the Emperor survived, and the Empress was protected by the child in her womb. Thus, this future prince will become a legend, thanks to his feat. And since that's how it turned out, it would be nice if Rose lived her life as a ruler. Ariel is struck by the woman's hatred, and now she only wonders where Kyle is. And the Empress is surprised that even before her death, the girl worries about him. By now, he should already be with Alberto, and they have prepared something for him too. Rose's brother is planning to poison the crown prince with a potion. It is quite possible that he has already drunk it and lost consciousness. But the saint doesn't have to worry, as she has no intention of killing Kyle. The woman just wants to seal his energy and make him her doll. When it's all over, Rose plans to put all the blame on the saint. Then she will turn the temple upside down and restore her brother's good name. And she will finally finish off the maid Ariel, as she originally intended to do. But the saint gets to her feet and says that her Anna is not a servant, but a priestess. It's worth seeing the face of Rose, who didn't expect such a turn of events. Ariel explains that the Empress came up with a wonderful scenario, but it was a saint who came up with it. After this, she asks Dwayne to get up and jokes that nap time is over. The man gets up and looks as if nothing happened. He then tells the saint that she really is a terrible person. Even the god of knowledge, Hesed, agrees with this knight's thought. But Ariel, in this situation, considers this a pleasant compliment. The girl thanks Dwayne for doing a great job with his role. But at first she felt so sorry for him that it was impossible to look. The Empress can no longer stand their dialogue and asks them to stop it. Although the saint had once again come up with some kind of trick, she had nevertheless prepared for it. If one bottle of poison is not enough, it is worth using a second one. This deadly poison is different from the first one, so no one will be able to escape. But Ariel replies that this time too the Empress will not succeed. After all, this poison only paralyzes, but does not kill, and the one in the air also does not matter. And the knights and His Majesty will wake up in about an hour. And this is all because the saint prepared them for this performance in advance. A few days before, Kyle informed Ariel that a Chronia had been found in the Empress's chambers. This time she has nowhere to retreat, and she will surely come up with a new plan. The prince has already captured one of her confidants, and Rose's options need to be narrowed down. He is going to arrange everything so that the Empress will buy poison through this man. Although it looks like a provocation, Rose always has a choice. And Ariel agrees with Kyle because everything depends on the Empress herself. So it's not a bad thing that she will have to choose between two options. Moreover, it will be easier to prepare for the consequences. In this case, Ariel suggests passing off the paralyzing poison as deadly. She recently read about it in a book, and there is a good remedy that is difficult to obtain. But if Kyle makes good use of Rose's confidant, everything should work out. And the prince begins to smile, since the saint's plan is even more villainous than that of the villainess herself. Ariel explains that her safety comes first. Kyle tells the girl that she is more suited to the palace than the temple. At that moment, Ariel hears Rayhouse's voice right behind her. The high priest turns to the prince and says that they have already discussed this. After all, a holy person of the temple and her personal conversations about well-being should not be conducted alone. Kyle should discuss this with the high priest as well. And now that everything has happened, it turns out that the Empress has acquired a deadly poison. So now it's time for her to give up because she's trapped again. At this moment, Rayhouse enters the palace with a squad of knights. But the Empress continues not to give up and shouts that His Majesty has lost consciousness. She asks to seize the saint, whom she blames for what happened. Allegedly, on the orders of the Crown Prince, Ariel was going to put everyone to sleep and then kill them. At this moment, Rayhouse activates the ball, which recorded all of Rose's words. In them, one can clearly hear the whole story that she wanted to invent in order to accuse the saint. Rose is in real shock from this turn of events. She didn't expect that she could be so openly exposed in front of everyone. All that remains for the Empress to do is to deny what is happening. However, she herself once donated this recording ball to the temple. And who would have thought that it would come in handy right now? After this, an order is given to guard the Emperor and capture his wife. But this is not the only surprise that awaits the woman, and sheer horror appears in her eyes. Right in front of her feet, Kyle throws the head of her brother Alberto. Rose can't believe that this man is no longer alive. But she was so looking forward to her brother that Kyle couldn't help but bring him with him. After she became Empress, Alberto killed 17 people. And before that, he took the lives of 8 more innocent people. And if the Empress's plan had succeeded today, there would have been even more victims. But from today on, Alberto's atrocities come to an end. The Empress went completely mad because Kyle took everything from her. So she curses the Crown Prince for all her failures. And Ariel becomes curious about what made Rose so cruel. At first, she thought she just had a bad relationship with the prince. Although she was called a villain in the novel, why